We're on the air, Mr. Chairman.
The May 24th, 2022 meeting of the Long Hill Planning Board is called to order at 7:34. We have one item on the agenda, a hearing, and if anybody is in the courtroom not planning to listen to the hearing, you're in the wrong place. Can we have the announcements, please?
Absolutely. Number 1 on the agenda is call to order and statement of compliance. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel newspaper, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Number 2, standard board procedures. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Number 3, meeting cutoff. Announcement is made that as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the planning board not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. at any regular or special meeting of the board unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting to a later specified cutoff time. Number 4, electronic devices. All in attendance are asked to mute cell phones or any electronic devices as to not interrupt with the proceedings and the recording. Number 5, Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Committeeman Ray is recused this evening. Committeeman Verleza is recused this evening. Ms. Still?
Present.
Mr. Hands?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mr. Malinowski?
Here.
Mr. File is absent this evening. Vice Chairman Richardson is excused this evening. Chairman Sandow?
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. This meeting is, or this hearing is being held here in the courtroom. We have opened up the Zoom link for anyone who might be watching at home, but we will not be taking questions, comments from anyone who is not in the courtroom. Speaking of in the courtroom, is there anyone in the courtroom who is an attorney who will be representing others in town? Is there anyone here in the courtroom that is a professional expert who intends to offer expert testimony during the course of this hearing? I saw a hand out there.
I don't intend to be sworn in as an expert.
You do?
I don't.
You don't? Okay, then that doesn't count.
That's why I hesitate.
Okay. That being the case, then I think that the applicant's attorney can come to the table up here, have a seat, make yourself comfortable, and proceed. And while you're walking up, I will ask our counsel for his comments at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to let the record reflect now that we're calling the G2 Development Group LLC matter, that I did have an opportunity to review the notice for this particular application, the MLUL notice. I found the content to be sufficient, found it to be timely served, certified mail on May 14, published on May 14 as well, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So it's my opinion, based thereon, that the board does have jurisdiction to hear and decide the application. And I'm happy to swear in the witnesses at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Forrest.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for your time this evening. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Westfield Planning Board for 12 years, so I understand and appreciate your volunteerism, and thank you for your time this evening. I'm here representing G2 Development. I have one witness to present to you this evening, but he will wear two hats, Mr. Matt Seckler. We will qualify him both as a professional engineer and as a professional planner. As you're aware, we have an application for what I viewed as a minor subdivision. I think your expert, though, corrected me and viewed it as a major subdivision That is fine. For purposes of the record, I did in fact provide Ms. Kuntz with the certified mail slips, the originals, as well as the original affidavit of publication was delivered to me today. She has both of those materials. The application is a request for a 3-lot subdivision.
Move closer to the mic.
Sure. Never been accused of being quiet, but that's okay. The application is for a 3-lot subdivision on the corner of Gates Ave and Mitchell. We are deficient in various with regards to bulk and size of the lot. The engineer will be sworn upon your accepting him as an expert. He'll provide testimony as to the topography as well as the lot size. Chairman, you tell me how you would like to do it. My thought was I have him present testimony of an engineering capacity. We conclude with board questions on the engineering piece of it. I can then turn him over as a professional engineer. If you'd like, he could testify in both regards, and then we just have one set of questions from the board. I didn't want to present him twice to the public, but I'll do whatever you want, Mr. Chairman.
You are clairvoyant because you just tried to answer my next question, which is, do you want to proceed with all his testimony at once or to separate it between engineering and planning? I really let it go your way.
Matt, what do you prefer? Let it run, right? Yeah. Okay, so we'll present all his testimony and then we'll turn him over to you fine people as well as in the public.
Okay, after he has completed all his engineering and planning testimony, I will ask the board's professionals to deal with their reports and their questions for him, followed by the board members, and following that, questions from the public. And that'll keep him busy for a few minutes.
Great. Mr. Chairman, all of the exhibits that Mr. Sekler will be referring to have been provided to you previously in the package presented, with the exception of 2. There were some exhibits which were marked A1, which will be explained by Mr. Sekler, as well as a second package which was marked as A2. I'll provide those to the board at the appropriate time so that you have those. Everything else has already been provided and will be referred to as part of the previously submitted package.
That's fine, Mr. Chairman, if I may. The only thing I would say, though, is that if anything has not been submitted at least 10 days in advance of this evening, it'll have to be marked as an exhibit regardless, and so we'll make sure.
We provided them to Ms. Kuntz earlier today. I think they were posted on the internet today.
Correct.
We only made those in the last few days. We will provide those. We'll have copies for the public as well.
I can see that Mr. Rendowitz has a very brief question.
Yeah, the 2 exhibits that were mentioned, you presented to the board are available. When do we see?
They were posted on the website today.
At what time?
Today, they were posted on the website at, I'll tell you right now, hold
Because I
on.
downloaded and I just need time.
Hold, and I will tell you the exact time.
Great.
1:01 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay.
We presented those early as a courtesy so that the public could get those. We'll certainly reference those and specifically mark those this evening, Mr. Warner.
And all plans were submitted more than 10 days in advance of this evening, correct?
Well more than 10 days. Mr.
Okay,
Warner.
pursuant to the municipal land use law, correct?
Correct, and those, I believe, have been posted on your website for at least some, I'm not sure when you posted them, Deb, but for quite some time.
I think I posted them the end of last week, and they've been available to the public. Many members of the public have been into our office as is allowed to view the plans.
Great, thank you.
Call
Any
your
other
witness.
preliminary questions, Mr. Chairman? Otherwise, I'd like to...
No, call your witness and we'll
Great.
swear him in.
Mr. Sekler, I think over here, so that the public can see it as well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what your protocols are. He certainly can sit at the table if you'd like, but you tell us.
First, you need a microphone. Then you can take the microphone anywhere you're comfortable,
All right, let me just put
as long as it's within,
Parking lot?
as long as it's within the hearing room.
batteries are already dead, so let's put them back in.
Do you want to move?
That's right. Well, while we're putting the batteries in the microphone, I'll swear in, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sekler, as well as our board professionals, our planner, Ms. Laney, and our engineer, Ms. Anello. Do all 3 of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you all.
Outstanding. Mr. Chairman, I
Okay.
call my first and only witness, Mr. Matt Seckler. We'll be qualifying him, as I said previously, as a professional engineer and as a professional planner. Mr. Seckler, if you would please provide for the board the benefit of your education and experience in engineering and in planning.
Absolutely. My name is Matt Seckler. That is Seckler. I'm a principal with Stonefield Engineering Design. Address is 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Union College in Schenectady, New York, a Master's in City Regional Planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey. Been practicing in the field for over 15 years, been accepted before over 100 boards in the state of New Jersey as an expert in both fields.
And both your license as a professional engineer and a professional planner are valid as we speak today in New Jersey.
That is correct, yes.
And have you ever presented testimony before this board or any other board in this municipality?
This board, I served as a traffic engineer on an application it was during COVID. It was virtually for a number of hearings.
So
My
in addi-
time was short, but the application was long.
So in addition to this board, you've been qualified in over 99 other boards in the state of New Jersey?
Yes.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I request that the board recognize Mr. Seckler both as a professional engineer and as a professional planner.
Do any members of the board or our consultants have questions?
Nope.
Nope.
Oh, good.
Anyone know of any reason why he should not be qualified? Speak now. Otherwise, you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Seckler, you were engaged by G2 Development Group to review properties located on the corner of Gates Avenue and Mitchell. I apologize, I think it's street, but I'm not sure.
Don't lose your mic.
Right. Is that correct, Mr. Seckler?
That is correct.
And as part of your review of that property, what exactly is it that you do? How do you start that process? Give us the benefit of your information relative to this project.
Certainly. For this project, our first task was actually to perform a survey to get an understanding of the existing conditions of the subject site along with the neighboring roadways. Upon receiving the survey, we also performed site visits ourselves, walking the site, walking the neighborhood, walking up and down the street, getting an understanding again of those existing conditions. We reviewed the zoning ordinance, the master plan, and working with the applicant, developed a plan to consolidate and then subdivide the subject properties that is part of the application tonight.
Now, the survey that we've provided to the board, it is electronically signed. There is an erased seal on that. Is that correct?
Correct. I think sometime in the last couple of years, New Jersey began accepting digitally sealed surveys. At that
I know
point.
some of the board members who have been a little more senior sometimes look for that raised seal, and in this particular circumstance, because of COVID, none is provided, but still we're compliant. Thank you, Mr. Seckler. If you could please review the site with the board so that they understand, I'm sure they're familiar, but so they understand technically what we have there on the corner.
Absolutely. And I'll use my first exhibit. I think the aerials were A1. Was that what you marked it as?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Seckler, you're marking A1 as an exhibit. Please describe for the board what it is that they're reviewing so that they understand and we can qualify that as an exhibit.
And I'll try to stand so maybe both the public and the board could see at the same time what A1 is. And I have 3 sheets, I believe. Deborah, you marked all 3 sheets as A1? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
So A1 consists of 3 sheets. It shows a aerial image. This one was actually taken in March of 2021. The date prepared is May 23rd, 2022, prepared by Stonefield Engineering. The first sheet, again, is an aerial image with the site outlined in black, and I'll describe it in a second. The second sheet overlays.
We have these provided to the board?
These I only have one. The other exhibits I have handouts of. The second sheet, it shows, again, an aerial with assorted lot sizes of nearby properties along with estimated floor areas. Those estimates are from using aerial images and measuring estimated floor areas of properties. And the last image, or the last sheet, which I'll get into near the end of the hearing, is again an aerial image with properties outlined in red and green, and I'll explain the purposes of that shading as we go on.
Great, thank you. Please describe the lot, if you would.
Absolutely. So the subject site and this application is for addresses of 17 and 23 Gates Avenue, it's known as Block 13509, lots 17. Whoa. sorry about that, lots 17 and 50 and 38. It's located at the southwest corner of Gates and Mitchell. The subject property, again, consists of 2 lots. There is one narrow lot that is located on the western side of the property, and a much wider lot that's located on the eastern side of the property.
The lesser of the 2 lots is a vacant lot, is that correct?
Correct. There's nothing on that lot. That's lot 17. That measures about 7,362 square feet. That is the narrow lot, again, westerly lot.
And the other lot, lot 23, that has improvements upon it, correct?
There is a house and a garage located on that property. I believe there's some fencing as well on the property. That lot is 26,346 square feet, and again, that is the corner property that fronts along both Gates and Mitchell.
So, Mr. Sekular, as we look at zoning, this is a 20,000 square foot minimum zone in the R4, correct?
Correct.
So we have one compliant and one non-compliant lot that we're talking about this evening.
As it relates to purely the lot area.
Purely size of the lot, correct?
Purely size of the lot, there is one lot that meets lot area and one lot that does not meet lot area. And again, in a 20,000 square foot lot, we have this one lot, again, is at about 7,362 square feet. On the property, as you mentioned, there are 2 structures, or 2 main structures. One is the house. I believe it's abandoned at this point. That house is located in, I would say, relatively close proximity to the road. I believe it's about 9 feet from the property line. In addition, the garage located in the rear of the site is located about 24 feet from the rear property line. So the current condition is about 8.7 feet for the house to the front and about 24 feet from the garage to the rear. The site had access via Mitchell Road. It has a long driveway. Now it's gravel or generally dirt and overrun weeds. Again, from Mitchell towards the site itself, again, that access point from Mitchell with that very long driveway. The site does have I would say a pretty significant change in topography as you go from Gates to the rear. It's about a 20-foot difference as you measure from Gates along the narrow lot to the rear. So again, about 20-foot difference as you go from front to back. The larger lot, it's a little bit less of a change in grade, but still pretty significant. The change in grade for the larger lot is about 13 feet. So you're about elevation 260 up along Gates Avenue, elevation 247 in the rear. So again, you have this fairly significant change of grade as you go from Gates to the rear property lines.
And Matt, the whole neighborhood has that slope. I think it's from Long Hill Road up top. As you come down, the whole neighborhood slopes down into a valley. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and again, it's a little less severe as you head, on the east, but as you go to the west, especially again, our westerly property has that, I'd say, fairly significant change of grade.
Thank you.
So that basically sets the table in terms of what the existing condition is at the subject site. Again, house, garage, house up near the property line, actually closer to the property line than nearby neighbors. Garage in the rear. Rear garage is actually closer again to the property line than most of the nearby neighbors that back up to houses on the adjacent streets. So our proposed development was to take these 2 lots and propose a 3-lot subdivision, basically split this property up into 3 pieces. I think I'll share the site plan, which this was again a submitted item. This is sheet C3.
Just note the final revision date on that, please,
Final revision date was April 26, 2022.
which were previously provided to the board as mentioned.
So we're proposing as part of this application is to take this property, eliminate the current division of the 2 lots, again, that created that narrow lot and that large lot, and create 3 lots. The 3 lots, and we label them A, B, C, A being the westmost lot, B being the middle lot, and C being the easternmost lot. Their lot sizes are 13,511 feet for the one on the left, that's lot A, 11,730 feet for lot B, that's the one in the middle, and the one on the right is 8,467 square feet, that is the lot that fronts on the corner of Mitchell. In terms of the lot width, this zone does have a 100-foot lot width requirement. We actually meet that on lots A and B. We do not meet that on Lot C, which is the corner lot. That lot is in, I believe it has 81 feet of frontage along Mitchell and 91 feet of frontage on Gates. But again, the intention was to space these out utilizing the lot width that is consistent with the zoning and basically create properties pulling back with, again, that consistent lot spacing that the zoning in the R4 district allows for.
Specifically, you refer to Lot C. Since that is a corner lot, can you just express to the board and to the public what the requirements are on that? It's basically 2 front yards, is that correct?
Correct. There are some front yard recalculations that the zoning code allows for in terms of if you have 2 front yards in the case of a corner lot like this. In terms of where you put the building itself, there is some allowances for a lesser front yard setback. But again, we are having 2 front yards with this corner lot.
And in this particular circumstance, based on your recommendation and the decision by G2 Development, it was determined that the best orientation of the house on Lot C would be towards Gate and not towards Mitchell?
No, Lot C faces Mitchell.
I'm sorry, my
has
apologies.
access towards Mitchell. The other 2 have towards Gates. That was direction from G2 Development. Again, but in speaking with them, they did not have a preference one way or the other. But in, again, working through this process, they decided perhaps having it along Mitchell would be advantageous in terms of the way that the property lays out.
And so the board understands, if we do get that far and the board does have a preference as to the orientation of that home on Lot C, we have no desire to keep it the means or manner that it is and would certainly turn it towards Gates if that would be something that the board would be interested in, assuming we get there.
We don't need to deal with that quite yet. I'll let you proceed. But I would like to suggest that if there's anyone in the audience who would like a closer view, come on up and take a look while he's talking.
All right, so Matt, at the bottom, we have the grading. I know you talked about it as it's 20 from front to back. Let's just go through that more specifically so we can see, because in the proposals, there are some changes there.
Yes. So I'll try to give some testimony around the crowd. As mentioned, there is a significant grade from front to back on the site. I'll move over here, I guess. There's significant grade from front to back for the site. Now, the benefit of doing something like a single-family house is the fact they could utilize a basement to basically help try to make up some of that grade, help to alleviate that type of transition from a front yard to a rear yard. So the way the site has been designed, and we have some, I would say, conceptual, visions of what the buildings or what the proposed houses may look like, would be to have basically what appears as a typical kind of 2-story house from the front. In the rear, you would have a basement that would have a step out. It would not be a completely flush walkout basement, basically a step out. You would step up a step or 2. But again, that basement allows for the change in elevation that, in this case is about a 10-foot grade elevation between your front yard and your walkout step-up basement to be accommodated within the site. So all of these houses, again, would have what I'm going to call a step-out basement. Again, it's not completely flush. You do take a step up out of the basement, but again, that helps alleviate some of the grade change that exists from front to back on the site.
And Matt, just explain to the board in this particular circumstance, there is a portion of their ordinance, technically reading it, a floor would be any area of the home that is more than, I think, 50%, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys. A story, rather, I apologize. If you could explain to the board how we will not be calculating that as a story because of the grading and such.
Well, I believe it's not counted in the height because the subfloor is below the finished grade because you are stepping out of the basement. However, it may be considered a story per the zoning ordinance, but it will not be considered part of floor area, I believe. Not part of floor area because the basement you step out of up as opposed to flat. Sorry, and I apologize. I did say, but in terms of height and all the calculations as they relate to height, they all are related to the height of the finished floor ground around it. So basically, when we do our calculation of height, we're going from the lowest point basically to the highest point. So we are, the height calculation is generally along the back of the site. Really what only generally 1 or 2 neighbors may see. The height that appears from most of the people driving by, they will see your standard first floor, second floor with a roof is what you'll see from driving by on the road. If you were to stand in the backyard, you would see a partial basement, then a first floor, second floor, and then a roof. So that's basically, but the height calculation per the ordinance goes basically on your greatest grade change, which again is in the rear of the site.
And then suffice to say, Matt, if we're going from the greatest area, if we're going uphill, it's going to get less and less and less as we go towards the front of the home, the streetscape, so to speak.
Correct, yes. And again, as part of this project, and again, there was extensive comments raised by the board engineer and planners. In order to accommodate some of these grade changes, there are a series of walls. Our largest wall consists on the western side of the property. There is an area of what I would consider the steepest slopes between our westernmost lot line and our next door neighbor, a single-family house to our west. We look to basically put a wall that aligns with the edge of our building, edge of our house out towards the road. Again, that wall will change in grade as it gets towards our house, but that's to accommodate being able to save and not need to regrade an area that will allow for a number of the trees, the mature trees in that corner to be maintained. So that is probably the location of our largest wall. We do have some other walls around the backyard areas to create some flat areas for patio. Around the backs of the site, and again, there are some other, I would say, walls, again, kind of near the property line or building lines between the properties themselves. But we do have to engage with a series of walls. We understand that any wall greater than, I believe it's 4 feet or greater than 3.5 feet requires subsequent calculations that we would agree to provide should the board act favorably on this project.
And I believe your ordinance also requires some type of fencing on top of certain heights of walls. I think there was a recommendation in one of the reports that we include some more decorative, not just chain link. Certainly, we would stipulate to work with your professionals to put an appropriate fence there that will be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood.
One of the aspects of the application, again, is the location of those houses themselves. The R4 zone does have a front yard setback requirement of 50 feet along Gates Avenue. So basically, that means that from the property line back, the house is supposed to be 50 feet. That said, in looking at the character of the neighborhood, we looked at basically the next 3 properties to the west of this. Nearly all of them had a front yard setback in the range of 25 feet, which is what we set our buildings at along Gates Avenue. So the goal here was to basically not push our houses so far back that they would look out of place, basically keep them in line with the neighboring properties. And again, I have more aerial exhibits that I'll be able to show generally where our buildings lie in comparison to the properties next to us. I think the only house that I think would comply with the 50-foot front yard setback is actually the one that is immediately across the street from, I think, the property line of B and C. That house is fairly pushed back, but the remainder of the houses along Gates Avenue appear to be not in compliance with the 50-foot setback. That does allow us to keep the properties actually a little pushed up from the rear yard setback, basically helping respect our rear neighbors. In that case, we are significantly further from the rear yard setback than what is required. We're required to be 25 feet from the rear setback line. At our closest point on Lot A, we're at 62.3. And the closest point on Lot B, we are 37.8 feet from the rear property line. So in terms of the 2 properties that have what is defined as a rear yard setback, which is A and B from the neighboring property that fronts on Mitchell, we have more than sufficient rear yard setback space for our property by pushing the buildings up, which again actually fits more in compliance with generally what you see on Gates Avenue. Again, the goal of this site was to look at what the allowable or what the prevailing lot width was in this zone. We understand that we do not have, I would say, the depth that some of the other properties have. The missing lot width that we suffer from as part of this application is generally in a rear direction. Again, because our lot width is compliant. 100 feet is required or more than 100 on A, 100 feet is required or more than 100 on B. So we are compliant in that aspect. We don't have the width, depth. We pulled the houses, again, closer to the road to provide for sufficient buffering in the rear, and it is generally consistent with what else is seen in the zone along Gates Avenue.
Now, Matt, I think in this particular ordinance of Long Hill, the ordinance says that it's supposed to be 50 feet from the property line. Other towns have an averaging. In your expert opinion, did you use a different calculation to determine what you felt was most fitting for the neighborhood?
Yeah, and again, what we utilized was generally looking at the prevailing setbacks of nearby properties. And again, I'll pull up, this is A1, the second sheet, and if it doesn't fall over, what it shows, again, is an aerial photograph a little more zoomed out. It shows the 3 proposed developments on the aerial, along with the nearby properties, and what you could see is, when you look to the properties to our left, and across the street, with the exception of the one that's, again, generally across the street from Lot C, all of them have front yard setbacks generally consistent with what we are proposing. The only thing is when you're doing, kind of field measurements, I can't see from the nearby property where their actual lot line is, but I can on aerials measure from where the street is compared to their house. And we are consistent along Gates Avenue with where our buildings fall on that line.
So from a perspective of an engineer, or just forget even that, just as a citizen, as I drive down the street, right, no one's going to take out a tape measure. No one's going to know that this is an R4 zone, generally speaking. No one's going to know that we have 100-foot minimum widths or that 50-foot setbacks. As you drive down the street, the homes that are proposed are going to look, generally speaking, relative to the homes that currently exist, as both to lot width and as to front yard setback. Is that true?
Yes.
And similar question as to, well, we'll get there in a second. I was going to talk about height and size, but I think the one thing we skipped over, and I apologize, we both got a little ahead of ourselves. We talked about width, we talked about depth, location of that property, the houses on the properties. We never talked about lot size. Can you describe for the board what the proposed lot sizes are, how they're deficient and why they're deficient?
Correct. So in terms of the lot sizes, as I mentioned, we have 3 lots with 3 different sizes. The westernmost lot is Lot A. That is 13,511 square feet. Lot B was the middle, 11,730. And Lot C, 8,467 square feet. Again, when we sought to divide this project up, we looked at that lot width minimum, came up with pretty close to 100 feet on each lot width, and drew a line from front to back on the site, and then basically calculated the lot width accordingly. That said, we also took a look at the general vicinity around the project, and again, this might be a little planning mixed in, but I think since I'm giving all the testimony at once, we might as well get into it. The third sheet of A1 shows an aerial exhibit. Now this one is a little bit more zoomed out. This one shows the entire distance from Mitchell to Torbert on Gates Avenue, and what it shows is our proposed lots, again, is uncolored, with all the remainder lots on that street either red or green. The code for what is red and green is whether these lots are lot size compliant per the R4 zone. Again, the R4 zone, which is what we're seeking a deviation for from lot size, requires 20,000 square feet for the lot. What we show here is that there are only 3 lots along Gates Avenue between the 2 roads that meet the 20,000 square foot requirement. Those are the 2 green lots located about 4 and 5 properties over to the left of our site, and the 1 property that is basically across from Lot C. Those are the ones that are compliant. So those are the ones, if someone came in today and said, I want to build my house on this lot that I own, they would not be coming before this board for a lot area variance. And again, when you have developments that have grown over time that pre-exist most of the common zoning ordinances, it's not uncommon for a zone to be created. Again, you're trying to create an R4 zone for large areas within a municipality. It may not fit every single historic, and I use the word historic not in the sense that this is historically sensitive, but historic meaning that it predates most of the zoning ordinance. You don't necessarily come up with a set of standards that fits exactly all the pre-existing development. So in looking at this, it is clear that this neighborhood or this block along Gates Avenue does not necessarily fit that 20,000 square foot zone requirement. There is clearly a history here or a neighborhood here that has lots that, again, that vary in size. They range in size. And what we've done is, and this I do have hands out for.
Matt, let me just ask you a question. In fairness to the process, so our lot, one of our lots would in fact be green if we were depicting it on the sheet, and one will be red, correct?
Yes, yes.
So let's take those 2 out. Can you do a count for us? Of the lots on this street in this neighborhood, how many are compliant? We see 3?
3 plus
Plus
R1, so be 4.
Okay. And in terms of the non-compliant lots, how many lots are non-compliant on this street?
There
A
are,
dozen or more, correct?
yes, yes.
So, in effect, the 20,000 square foot requirement in this neighborhood is in fact out of whack, so to speak, for lack of a better legal term, right?
I wouldn't use that in my testimony, but you could use that
Yes,
as the
okay.
attorney.
And that's the point of coming before a board of this nature, that when we produce a master plan like this board would do, they try their best to fit every square peg into a round hole, and when it doesn't, we come and we ask for variances, and that's why we're here today, correct?
Correct, and we do have an exhibit that kind of highlights that, and this I do have handouts for. So let me put it up and we'll mark it. Here's just, oh, I have some for the public if they would. How many of you guys?
Let's do 7.
That's all right, we got it.
I have it
We can give it to, hand it out.
Everybody has it?
I'll just take one hard copy for the file.
Just give us one.
Great.
And this has been marked, this is
So
A2.
this is, yeah, how many sheets were in this that we marked as A?
Counselor,
This was marked as A2 previously.
I think this is 2 sheets, yep.
That's just 2
Sheet 1 and
sheets?
sheet 2.
Okay.
Counselor, when you said out of whack, did you intend to pass judgment on the quality of the ordinances in Long Hill?
Absolutely not, Chairman, absolutely not. It was more of a standard that we see, when we talk about zoning, what we try to do is we try to conform to what currently exists. And when we have an R4, which is a 20,000 square foot minimum, we look and we say, okay, that's not what currently exists, and that's why we would come before a board, show the board the deficiency in the puzzle piece that we're
You
provided.
keep using judgmental words like deficiency.
I don't mean any disrespect by it, Chairman, I apologize.
Okay. I think I heard testimony that these lots are smaller than the ordinance requires.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman, correct, yes.
So,
And you have no opinion on the merits of the ordinance as it exists?
Definitely do not, Chairman. We're just showing you the size of these lots and those others in relation to the 20,000 square
Okay,
foot.
that's
minimum.
legitimate testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the neighborhood, thank you.
so this is A2, this is the first sheet, and it's called average lot size. And this looks along the entire Gates Avenue, again, between Mitchell and Tolbert. Average lot size along Gates Avenue is about 14,000 square feet. What we've listed here is every lot along that stretch. The highlighted ones in green, those are the ones that meet the 20,000 square foot, and we've basically stepped them down from largest on the right to smallest on the left. The proposed lots we added to this chart, so they are colorized here, they fall on number 10 and 11, generally in the median, around the middle of the property, middle of the chart, with the small lot, the one in the corner, being all the way down on the left-hand side, about the third smallest along that stretch of Gates Avenue. So again, this was meant to show, obviously, there is a plethora of existing housing that, again, likely predates the zoning ordinance, falls below 20,000, and lots A and B would fit generally in the middle of the development. So if you're looking for something that would generally fit in to the average, it's generally in the middle. The next sheet, this is A2, sheet 2. Oh, I have this handout as well, if the board
Mr.
wants.
Seckler, do you know, if we were to use the existing lot sizes, do you know where they would fall on that chart?
Yes, the existing lot sizes, the existing lot would fall all the way on the right. Either 14, which would be, hold on, let me go back to this. Existing lot would be right on the 24 spot, basically either the
Mr.
tallest
First,
or right near the
Mr.
tallest.
First, you're blocking.
I'm blocking you guys.
You're both blocking too.
The existing large lot, yes, with green all the way on the right-hand side, so it would be completely, top 1%, and then the other one would be all the way at the top, at the bottom 1%. So that's what we currently have as our lots, is one all the way on the right would be one all the way on the left. Here's some of these. Second sheet, if this people, if you want. And this is where I'm going to wish I had 2 different easels, so we'll start.
Can you want to use the chair?
I'll start with explaining on one and then go into the other one.
Hold it, man.
No, I think I got it. I don't want to block people here.
Say,
If I may,
Chair, with
Mr.
the
Chairman,
arms.
just for the record, the second sheet that you just handed out, average size of corner lots, that's, is that Exhibit A2, page 2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It was a rhetorical question. I knew the answer, but I wanted to make sure everybody can follow along. Thank you.
So one of the things we looked at when we were looking at this neighborhood is the corner lots along Long Hill Road and along Gates Avenue. Because there are certain neighborhoods where corner lots that have been created over time are larger than other lots. And it was actually, when we looked at the general neighborhood, we actually found the corner lots that kind of pre-exist in this neighborhood actually are some of the smaller lots. They're not as large as some of the, I'd say the middle lots or the non-corner lots. And so we looked at the corner lots at Mitchell, both on the north and south side of Gates. We looked at the corner lot at Long Hill and Mitchell. We looked at Tolbert. We looked at Gates, again, those edge lots, and we looked at the one on Doherty. So we looked at those 5 lots. Hold on, 1, 2, 3. Yes. And we measured out what those average sizes would be. And we found that our corner lot falls generally, again, in the middle of the corner lots in this neighborhood. So we found that, again, for a corner lot in this kind of Gates, Long Hill Road area, that we fall in the number 3 position out of the 6 corner lots, this being a proposed lot, the other 5 existing. All of them are smaller than the 220,000 square foot requirement. Again, we fall in the general middle of that category. So, again, when we looked at the first sheet of A2, while we are on the lower end of this category in terms of lot size, when we look at corner lots, again, comparable lots on Long Hill and Gates, we fall generally in the middle. Again, clearly, we are seeking a variance. It does not meet a 20,000 square foot requirement, but as you'll hear in my planning testimony later, when you look at the neighborhood itself and what exists currently as the general existing development on some of these corners, we generally have a lot size that's comparable.
Matt, the one thing that we didn't address yet would be the lot coverage requirement of 25%. Can you walk the board through those numbers?
Yes, we are seeking a variance as it relates to lot coverage. This will get into the drainage and the stormwater, so I'll kind of hit all that at once. In terms of what we are seeking, 25% is what's required. Lot A is at 28.4%, Lot B is at 32.8%, and Lot C is at 27.1%. Again, that's lot coverage. That's not the building. That includes all improvements on the property. That means the driveway, the building itself. What we've found is, as part of this site, what we are proposing to do in order to mitigate the increased impervious coverage is create a series of seepage pits that will be able to capture roof leaders. So again, when the rain would come to this site and hit this site, anything that would hit the roof would be fed through roof leaders into a seepage pit that'd be located in the rear portions of the site, which would be able to hold and mitigate the increase in impervious coverage as part of this application. So we understand we obviously are increasing the amount of impervious coverage, but we are going to be utilizing seepage pits to mitigate that as part of our proposed stormwater development.
Is there any stormwater management infrastructure on that site now?
No, the site today, if rain hits the site, it basically flows to the property to the rear. It's generally the low point. So that is how the site's been designed. Again, we aren't changing the drainage patterns themselves, but we're looking to basically have anything that hits our surfaces go through the seepage pit, be stored on site, perhaps infiltrate into the ground. We'll have to do appropriate soil testing should the board find this application favorable to ensure that the size of the seepage pits will be able to hold back the necessary storms.
And in terms of the rear yards of the property, as they flow downhill, are we changing the grade so dramatically that there should not be any increase on the surface flow off our properties?
No, the grade change as it relates to the rear would not create any additional, I'd say, scouring or erosion as per the design. Of course, we would have to file to the appropriate soil conservation district, which would then again review this type of grading plan along with any type of temporary grading plan as part of the construction of the site.
And there were some recommendations, and I think it was the engineer's report with regards to silt fencing and runoff fencing and that.
Yep.
It would obviously comply with all of those recommendations and requirements.
Yep,
correct?
using the super silt fence. We also agree there were a couple of spot shots or proposed grades that can be changed slightly to help prevent certain areas of stormwater to build up along our foundation or nearby properties. We have the ability, and if should the board act favorably, to change the grading slightly to ensure that does not occur and the rainwater ends up in the appropriate seepage pits.
Great. Now, we have variances for what this ordinance calls critical area disturbance. If you could walk the board through those variances, please.
Certainly. So this is on sheet C4 of the submitted site plan set. The general area in which there is the most critical slope is in the northerly portion of Lot A. That's the westernmost lot. That is the area where we have the steepest slopes. So in that area, we are disturbing amount of critical slopes that requires us to seek variances. In addition, it does create an area that makes it very difficult to have a buildable area on this lot without disturbing this critical area. That said, we understand that, and I think our engineering plan, along with our agreement with complying with all the engineer's comments and any soil erosion or any soil conservation district's comments, that we can ensure that the disturbance in this area is limited and the site can be developed appropriately. There's a couple other, very small pockets. Just the general development plan. Previously, again, there is a house that currently sits, and there's a clearing that the house basically created in the center of really Lot B. And again, there's those, those critical slopes located more towards the westerly property line.
So specifically, Mr. Chairman, referencing the engineer's memo of May 16th, Section 7, A, B, C, D, and E would all be complied with as required.
I'm sorry, did you say the engineers 7? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
A through E, did you?
Yes.
Okay, all critical areas, thank you.
And any other, and obviously, anything else that the engineer would need, relatively speaking. From an engineering perspective, Matt, anything else you wanted to add? I think that's everything, right?
Utilities, I guess utilities and DEP are two things that we should discuss. Located across Mitchell Road, there's a large lake or pond, and then there is what looks like the outfall of that, I believe, creates some sort of wetlands located to the southeast of this page. And again, this is the aerial exhibit A1, the first sheet. Looking at it, we believe that even if there was a 50-foot buffer, our development would be outside of that area. Based on DEP mapping, it doesn't appear that that pond is a regulated feature. We based on our research, did not find that there was any endangered species or any Category 1 waterway that affected that buffer. So even at a 50-foot buffer, our development would be outside of that environmental area. Again, if the board or their engineering experts require us to do any other background regarding that, the freshwater wetlands or the riparian zone, we definitely would do that. The one issue we do have is obviously this appears to be on private property, so in terms of flagging or mapping, we would need permission from that property. But again, we believe at most it would be a 50-foot buffer, which would be outside of our property limits for whatever that wetland outfall from the pond is. Utilities, we obviously are aware with the limitations of sewer within the municipality. Obviously, there is one existing house here today. There are 2 lots today. Whatever we're permitted to build, we'd be happy to build. If there's something that we have to wait for the moratorium to be lifted, we obviously would wait for that as well.
So let's clarify that, Mr. Seckler. So The applicant is willing to proceed, if granted, with only those that would connect to the existing sewer system and would defer on building additional properties if allowed by this board until such time as the moratorium was lifted and/or, I guess, a septic or something else could be built on the property if that
Yeah,
would be.
yeah, I don't believe that.
Basically, he'd wait until the moratorium.
I don't believe the applicant has any intention on putting in a septic system, so I believe he'd wait, but obviously, if something doesn't change, maybe he would change his mind. But there's no intention to go septic, so we'll build as much as the sewer authority would allow.
And I just note, for the engineer, there were a number of technical comments with regards to the plans. All those would be corrected before the final submissions would be provided. Anything else on engineering, Mr. Seckler?
Nothing on my end.
All right, let's convert you to a planner. You've been presented as a professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I know we've peppered some of the testimony with some planning testimony, but specifically, let's talk about, from a planning perspective, your opinions related to this proposed 3-lot subdivision.
Yes, I think as part of this application, we need to, understand and remember the character of the neighborhood in terms of this project and where this property is located. Again, we showed a number of exhibits trying to show that we believe that this proposed development, especially the subdivision and lot areas, are, fit in the middle of the pack in terms of what you see when you go up and down Gates Avenue. Obviously, when you're walking, we feel that if we fall in the middle, then we're probably the least noticeable property. If you are on the end, if we built a 20,000 square foot lot and we built what I believe what is permitted, which I think is about a 4,200 square foot home on this property, we'd be, I would say, outside of the character of the neighborhood. That would put us on the high end. That green bar is all the way on the right-hand side. If we were compliant, we built out to our full floor area ratio. So again, in looking to fit within the character of the neighborhood, we looked at lot width, we looked at front yard setback, and we basically plopped the houses accordingly based on that. In terms of the housing styles, the 2 larger lots, we're looking at, we're proposing 2 4-bedroom houses. Houses would have 2-car garages. The smaller lot, which would be the smaller house, would be a 3-bedroom house with a 1-car garage. Again, I think fairly consistent with what you see on the development located here. I believe the applicant intends to have a family member live in the smaller lot, the one that fronts Mitchell, should the board act favorably on this project, in that smaller lot, again, with that 3-bedroom, 1-garage house. So again, when we were looking at the planning of this project, we looked at what does the neighborhood look and feel like, and that is what we found, is that the neighborhood looks and feels like assorted houses, some with 1-car garage, some with 2-car garage. Some they had 2 stories, some had 1 story. So that was the general development pattern that we looked at, and because there was no, I'd say, prevailing specific look, we believe that this development here basically falls in the middle. It will be, obviously the house is newer, it's newer housing stock. Looking at, the census data for Long Hill, seems like there's been only about 6% of the housing stock within the municipality, I think, has been built since, the late 1990s. So there will be newer houses, but the intention is for them to be around the same size in terms of the structure itself and fit on the same, fit when you're driving up and down or walking your dog up and down Gates Avenue.
So the direction of the applicant to you was to make them look and feel like they've been there for a very long time, correct?
That was the intention, yes. Obviously, it hasn't. It's going to be a new house, but the intention is to have, I would say, a architecture style that is similar to the houses around it. I do know that as part of this development, obviously there'll be a number of trees taken down in order to make way for the site, whether it's the driveways or the house themselves. I do know the applicant is willing to provide and replace all of the street trees along Gates Avenue, any ones that'll be removed as part of this project, he'd be willing to replace along that frontage. So in driving by the site, you'd have that same style look up and down this property. Again, looking at some of the neighboring properties, they may have, some of these houses just have 1 or 2 trees in their front yard. This property, if you drove by today, has about 40 trees in their front yard today. So again, keeping this site the way it is actually not consistent with the way the rest of the neighborhood looks. The way the rest of this neighborhood looks is garage up on Gates Avenue, houses about 25 feet off the property line, and, houses that are, typically 3 or 4 bedrooms. And that's basically what we are proposing along this stretch. So when we evaluate this project, and again, we look at both the existing nonconformities and proposed nonconformities that we are creating. Existing, we are actually moving our house further back from Gates Avenue, all 3, than what the existing house is on that property today. In terms of the rear yard, we have a garage currently on the property that's closer to the property line than any structure that we are proposing on the development today. So we are eliminating those 2 nonconformities or making them better in the proposed condition. We are compliant as it relates to the floor area ratio. So in terms of the size of the house, I would say the density of the house, the pure structure of it is in compliance in terms of the floor area ratio. When you're driving by on Gates Avenue, it's going to look like a 2-story house with a roof. Only if you're behind the house would you see that there is a basement, again, that step-up basement. Again, we are seeking, and I think this was within the planner's note, I want to indicate, because this was a variance that needed to be corrected, the aggregate side yard setback, I believe, requires 32 feet on Lot A, and we are, 36.8 feet, and we'll be at 32 feet, so we have a 4.8-foot variance for aggregate side yard for Lot A, but we meet the minimum side yard. And Lot B, we have required to have 35 feet for aggregate side yard, and we're at 34.8, so 0.2 feet off of the aggregate side yard for Lot B, but we do meet the individual side yards for that development. Those were 2 other variances, again, that we were seeking as part of this application. So again, I understand as a planner here that if we were to take out the cookbook, the zoning ordinance, and say, what can we build here that's exactly by the ordinance, I don't think that actually creates a development on this property that is consistent with the rest of the neighborhood on Gates Avenue. It'd be by far the largest lot, or nearly the largest lot. It would likely be the largest house on the lot at 4,200 square feet. And I don't believe that it would be consistent with the zone, consistent with the neighborhood. I think when you look here, and what we're seeking is a development that is consistent with the nearby houses in size. Overall, when I look at the positive, negative criteria as it relates to this development, I think that there's a number of positive criteria that we are seeking here. I think we are advancing health, safety, and welfare, purpose A, safety from natural disaster by obviously providing an upgraded home on this property from what exists today, and purpose I, which is visual environment. Again, the property itself does not look like it's been, or the building itself has not been maintained over the years. Which again, I think that this property is enhancing through visual environment. When we look at the negative impacts to the neighborhood, again, we spoke to the fact that we fit strongly in the middle of most of the categories as it relates to lot size, whether looking at the corner lots or the overall developments on Gates Avenue, as well as I look at the reexamination plan of 2013, along with your master plan and your housing plan. I note that your reexamination plan, again, wanted to ensure that Long Hill maintained its residential character, low density, ensure residential development that does not threaten natural resources. It looked to, again, provide groundwater recharge, which we are looking to do as part of this development. It looks to build outside the floodplain. Obviously, this is not a development that is within the floodplain. And it looks at the fact that there is obviously a limited growth in new units within the municipality over the last 15, 20, even almost 30 years. So we do believe that obviously, there are some people that desire new housing stock, and this is potential new housing stock in this neighborhood. But we understand that new housing stock obviously comes with changing the lot lines here, but we are again looking at a development that fits pretty firmly, and I'm referring to A2, in the general mid-vicinity of the property. It would note that even if we took this property and we made it 2 lots and just said, listen, we're going to split it right down the middle, we would basically still be in the 13, 14 category if we split this into two lots. So whether we create 3 lots or 2 lots, we generally fit in this middle category if we just divide it in half. If we keep the lots as is, again, if this board does not act favorably to this application, we would have a lot all the way on the right and a lot all the way on the left, which I think would be more out of character for the neighborhood than being these lots in the middle of the pack.
So your professional opinion is that based on the C2 standard, that the benefits outweigh the detriments, and that should be relied upon by the board if they felt it appropriate to approve our application, correct?
Yes, and in fact, in looking back at, again, the previous reexamination plans, it was mentioned within the reexamination plans that they recognized that zoning, as part of their zoning section, when they were reviewing all the issues with the previous master plan and the zoning ordinance, they indicated there are many substandard lots in the residential zone. So it was recognized within the township that, yes, they have an R4 zone, they have an R3 zone, they have these zones they established, but there are clearly many substandard lots, and that's what we see here on this block. This block is made up of substandard lots. We are looking to create a substandard lot, but one that fits in the middle of those substandard lots.
So we're clear to the board, elevations or examples of potential homes were presented to the board, but those were by way of example only. No actual house has been designed for these.
I don't think I
correct?
presented them yet.
Okay.
If you want me to, I could show the board.
If the board would like, okay. I think we're good, man.
All right,
Anything
you don't
else
want to see
you
the
wanna add?
houses? All right, 2-car garage, 1-car garage, 2 stories.
Anything else you want to add for the board?
That's it.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
At this point, we will start questioning by the board's professionals, and we'll start with the engineer. And if you wouldn't mind, since your report has been posted and available to the public, if you wouldn't mind working line by line through your report and getting responses from the applicant.
Sure, no problem. Let me just pull that up quickly. I believe Mr. Seckler has addressed some of these comments, but we'll go through. Matt, do you have a copy of the letter? So
Yes.
it'll be easier to go through. For members of the public, if you've had a chance to view it online, or if not, I'll go through some of these conditions. Specifically, conditions 1 through 4 relate to the technical aspects of the subdivision. This refers to meets and bounds descriptions, conferring with tax assessor's office, different conditions for map filing laws. Do you have any issue with complying with any of those requirements that are, legal requirements of filing a subdivision?
We would comply.
Okay. The next section is environmental comments, 5 and 6. These are related to freshwater wetlands and the pond on the neighboring
Excuse me a
property.
second. Could we get a little better answer on item number 4?
Sure. Comment number 4 is that the development of proposed lots A, B, and C will require the submission of a lot grading plan for review and approval required by the township ordinance. That also, I believe, is repeated in the approval section of this report. And again, any issues with complying with that? We'll
No.
kind of get into, I have some questions that are related to the grading, but we'll get into those a little bit more when we talk about stormwater.
Yes, and I think each lot requires its own lot grading plan accordingly.
So again, to the environmental comments, so it is your professional opinion that NJDEP land use permitting is not required for the development of any of the 3 lots, is that correct?
Correct. I believe we're outside, even if they were even if the pond was regulated, it would be outside what we believe would be a 50-foot buffer, which would be the maximum because there's no endangered species or Category 1 waterway on that site.
If the board does view this application favorably, would the applicant take exception to getting an absence-presence determination for flood hazard area, which is the simplest form of permitting, which basically is just DEP agreeing that, yes, the property is absent of flood hazard areas, and basically the same for wetlands, so not requiring you to go flag anything off-site, but then making the determination through a letter of interpretation for the area of impact, so just for your property stating that it's not impacted by any of those.
Yes, we would receive any approvals that, again, wouldn't require us to go on an adjacent property.
Critical areas, I believe you did testify that you would comply with all of these requirements, so the board and the public understands what I have listed here in critical areas. This is for the disturbance to the steep slope areas. These are supplemental regulations to promote more responsible development in steep slope areas. Additional silt fence double layers of protection. So instead of having one layer of protection, you'll have a secondary measure, and there will be what we call super silt fence, which is a much stronger fencing that even those large rainstorms that have become so common now doesn't really have the ability to take down. There's actual like chain link fencing in it. Additionally, this requires that as soon as the roof is on the structure of the house, that it's connected into the dry well system. This, again, is so that there's no runoff from the roof of the house that's going uncontrolled at any point. Basically, it's connected as soon as it's constructed. I think those are
Yeah, we would,
just to the comments.
we would agree. The only one that, on B,
Sure.
obviously, we would likely construct one of the lots at a time.
Right.
The one lot, which is A, the 1,000 foot, I know it says 1,000 square feet, or if approved, again, that we may be constructing, our disturbance may be more than 1,000 square feet when constructing that one house.
Okay.
But we are not looking to
Minimize
basically.
to the maximum extent practicable. I think
Exactly.
That's why I have 1,000 square feet, or,
Yes.
understanding that in order to build a house, you might need to disturb more than 1,000 square feet.
Yes.
I would just ask that, any areas that are restored around the house are restored and stabilized as soon as possible, again, so we avoid having, steep slopes that are unrestored for a long period of time, avoid any runoff, sedimentation, and all the, issues that come along with that.
Absolutely.
General comments. So building height. Not sure that we talked about building height, did we? We talked about the number of stories, but not so much building height.
Yes.
So can you describe for the board and the public what the requirement is for building height, what the variance is that you're asking, and how you calculated that? Because as you mentioned earlier, we don't have concrete architectural plans, we have conceptual. So
Yep.
how do you make that determination, based on the conceptual plans?
Absolutely. So the building height requirement in terms of the feet is 35 feet is what's required in the zone. Based on our calculations, and I'll go through how we came up with the calculation for Lot A and B, those are the bigger lots, we are at 38 feet. For Lot C, we are at 30.6 feet. So we seek variances for the feet, 3 feet, a little less than 10%, for A and B. The way that we calculated the building height was that we, based on architectural, again, concepts or visions, assumed that we would have a 9-foot floor-to-floor basement height, 10 feet first floor height, 9-foot second floor height, and a 10-foot rise for the roof. So that totals, if I do my math right, 38 feet, and that would basically be from the ground of the basement to the top of the roof. We felt that was the most conservative assessment of the height. We also provided within the plan the lowest ground elevation and highest ground elevation around the building itself. As I mentioned, the intention is to actually have a step-up basement. So when you come out of the basement, you'd be stepping up. So it may be a little less than that total of 38 feet when you count the stories of the building, maybe 37 and change, but we felt that 38 would be the comfortable number.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, you used the bottom floor of the basement elevation as your lowest point, although the lowest point grade around the building may actually be several inches or feet higher than that.
It would likely be a step or two, so it could be 6 inches higher.
Correct. So in your opinion, your estimate was on the conservative side, so it would not exceed 38 feet, however, it may be slightly less. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that accurate?
without architectural plans, I wanted to provide a top number that if the board grants an approval for variance, then we could work below that, as opposed to having to come back and seek an additional variance.
It's a no greater than.
Yes, no greater than. I think that is a, appropriate manner to go forward with that. As far as stories, so I know you did touch on this earlier, so this goes to some questions that I had written down. So you described the basement as a step up, not your traditional walkout basement, we'll call it. Was the step up design incorporated into the grading strictly to avoid being considered a story? Or did it fit better with the grading, or was it somewhere in between?
Probably.
Could you both get the grading and the story?
Somewhere in between, it was more actually of the floor area definition as opposed to the story definition.
Okay.
The story again, we would rather seek a variance for 3 stories in that case, where 2.5 is permitted, which again, based on the definition, I think we would still be a story for the basement.
Well, so a story, by the definition, is if 50% of the walls are exposed above grade.
Oh, so I think we would not,
We would not be.
we would not be a
The way
story.
you're describing it, it
It would
sounds
not.
like
Yeah,
may not be.
okay, so we will, then I guess our bulk table is correct. We would
So you're
still be two
not
stories.
seeking a variance for number of stories.
Correct.
It's a 2.5-story dwelling, or all three of them are 2.5 at most, and the height was as discussed.
But the height, again, calculates that piece that someone would see from the rear as opposed to the front.
Okay. And now, what about the attic space? Does any of the attic space meet the definition of a half-story that we, again, have to adjust?
No, I believe the attic is, I think the intention is for it to be a kind of hatch-type attic. I don't believe it's a story per the definition.
So, yeah, the ceiling height is 7.5 feet for no more than 50% of the.
Correct, yes.
Great. Comment number 10 relates to some of, some technical grading comments, specifically questioning, the plan's not up on the board at the moment, but some of the grading appears to direct water from one property onto the next toward the foundation. That's something we always want to avoid. I recommended the use of probably some swales or things in there to kind of alleviate that situation. Have you had a chance to review comments A, B, and C under those technical grading comments? And do you have any issues or concerns?
Yes, you were correct. I think we had, we labeled something 268, but should have been 269 elevation, so I think it's a 2-foot wall. We can pull back the 259 contour in B, and potentially even put in a yard drain and and basically connect to seepage if there is a pooling area on that side. That was all the way on the western side of the western lot. But we think we could change the contour of the 259 and get it to grade appropriately. And C, we either would use French drains or create a swale a couple feet from the building and then basically direct the drainage away from that foundation.
And that'll direct it away, okay.
Yep.
Comment number 11, I think you did address this in testimony, or the attorney touched upon this, that the plans do call for a 4-foot-high chain link fence above the retaining wall. Again, we do support the use of the restraining devices atop walls for safety and, for neighborhood safety and things like that, but, a chain link fence just doesn't seem in character with the neighborhood. Something a little bit more decorative would be a recommendation, especially if the board, feels that way.
I agree, we could go with a vinyl or something similar to that.
Something a little bit
Yep.
more.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a quick question on, I apologize for the
No problem.
interruption, on Ms.
Absolutely.
Anello's questions? Thank you. I just, twofold. One, for the benefit of the members of the public, these stipulated 2 conditions, just to be clear, both from the engineer and the planner, these are all in the event there's an approval. The conditions are conditions subsequent if there is an approval. If there's no approval, it's not conditional, it's a denial. So I just wanted everybody to understand the context of this. This is normally how hearings go with applications. They have to meet all their proofs and all potential stipulated 2 conditions are addressed. Number 2, the decorative fence, I don't know what the board prefers in the event there's an approval, and this condition comes into play, but oftentimes it's good to have either a specific agreement as to what that's going to be, or at least subject to the review and approval of someone. Fences sometimes are planners.
Have a little discussion on that.
But I take it the stipulation is you'll leave it to the board in the event there's an approval to decide whose review and approval that the decorative fence would be, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the
No problem.
interruption.
If you have any other questions or anything, just.
And I believe there was a reference in the planner's report to a more decorative facade or cover on that, which likewise we would do the same.
Going back to the engineering report, comment 12 is related to sign and sealed stability calculations for all retaining walls exceeding 4 feet in height. That's a building UCC code. You would not get your permits without providing those. As it relates, I did want to touch on, beginning of my report, there are variances requested for the retaining wall heights and because there is fencing above those walls. Is that correct?
That is correct.
what is the maximum retaining wall height proposed, and on which lots are you seeking those variances? Just to
On Lot
clarify.
A, we're proposing an 11.5-foot retaining wall. The entire retaining wall is not at that grade. It basically grades up as you go from the road to the house. So basically, would start at about, it would grade as you work yourself from Gates Avenue into the site and basically generally bury itself into the house itself. And then on Lot B, I believe we are at 8.5 feet, if I am correct.
Okay, and both of those walls are going to have fencing or restraints above them, is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you know the heights of those? Because that will need to be added to the variance request, because the way the ordinance reads, essentially the wall or fencing on top of the wall becomes part of the wall and is part of the height. So if you have an 11.5-foot wall with 36 inches or 48 inches.
I apologize. I think that was inclusive of the fall protection on top.
Okay, so 11.5 feet is including wall
Correct. The wall itself is about 7.5 feet. And again, that is, you know what, I might as well show it on the plans.
Yeah, I think that would be good, and let's just verify that you're in fact requesting the correct heights. And also, I think for the public, if you could describe where exactly these walls are on the lot. And my next question is gonna be why utilizing these walls in those areas is a better alternative.
So the 7.5-foot wall that again then has the fall protection on top is a wall that runs along from Gates Avenue to the westernmost portion of the house on the Lot A lot. It starts out as about a 1-foot wall and then basically works itself up as the grade of the property catches up. Essentially what you have is you want to have a driveway that's generally flat off the road. Essentially flat, just not very steep. But the grade of this property drops off significantly. So in order to basically flatten out the driveway, the front part of the property has to deal with a grade change between our front of the building and our property line to the west. The point of that, we technically could likely grade out this area, but there's one, this is the steepest part of the property, and two, there's vegetation, there's trees that basically are between our property and the westerly property, our house and the westerly property line that we assume that the nearby neighbor would like us to maintain. So the intention was if we were able to put a wall here, we don't need to disturb more critical area, and we're able to save the trees in that location. Again, it basically goes from 1 foot all the way up as we look to keep a generally flat front yard while the property itself has a steep natural grade to it.
And how about the retaining wall you're seeking a variance for on Lot B, the middle lot?
Lot B,
Describe.
very similar. It runs along the driveway itself. Again, same type of thing. You want a generally flat driveway. You have a grade change that exists between the two lots. That wall that basically runs along the driveway helps create a flat area for the driveway while creating limited disturbance or lesser disturbance to its west.
And so while you have the grading plan there, let's just verify. So on Lot A, it's a 7.5-foot wall with a 4-foot fence above it for a total of 11.5 feet?
Yes, the grades, top wall is at 269, bottom wall is at 261.5.
And how about on Lot B?
Lot B, top of wall is 264, bottom wall is 259.5, so that is about 4.5 feet plus the protection on top.
Plus 4 feet, so
Yep.
that's where we get 8.
Yep.
And Matt, just to clarify, the garage entry is going to be, in essence, at the same grade as the street, correct?
Yes, in essence. There's a slight pitch, but yes, it's within 1 foot of the street. And the natural topography of that area, if you were just to stand out there and look to where the future garage, it's about 10 feet down in a hole. So in order to make up that grade and flatten it, that's what the wall helps serve.
Thank you.
And I think to note too, while we're on the topics of the driveways, so because these are fronting on Gates Avenue, the driveways have to meet the existing grade of Gates Avenue, is that correct?
Correct.
And can you describe the grading of Gates Avenue?
You mean in terms of the natural grade along Gates Avenue? So Gates Avenue along our site runs high on the left side to low on the right side. Just for information, it's at elevation about 274 at our westernmost point, and it's at elevation about 250 at the easternmost point. So again, about 4 feet as you go from left to right on the property.
So it's a fairly significant grade on the existing road that you have to work around in order to get these driveways.
Yeah, exactly. The road is going like this, our property bends back, and we want to try to create something flat.
All right, thank you.
Can you just go through that again?
Yes.
Because this is, how much, when you say flat, how much is flat?
Well,
And how deep, how steep is the driveway? How,
the road,
Percentage.
so the property themselves, just naturally, I believe front to back on Lot A, if they're, with nothing on the site, is about 13% slope from front to back. Obviously, there's parts that are
yeah,
more
no,
steep.
in that area where the drive is, it's not 13%.
Oh, proposed or existing?
Existing and proposed.
Oh, so existing, the area of the driveway drops about 11 feet, and let me get you a dimension, and within about 30 feet. So it drops about 11 feet over 30.
Do you consider that
Naturally.
steep?
What'd you say?
Okay, carry on.
Yeah,
Carry
yeah.
on.
So that's natural. That's without the driveway there. The driveway is about at a 1 foot grade change from front to back. So we're basically, that's the wall is basically serving, is to basically take that 10-foot grade change and flatten it.
And that's where the basement comes into play?
That is one of the places where the basement comes into play, because you're flattening the front, you got to make up the grade within the house limits.
So you're dropping 5 inches every foot? 5 to 6 inches every foot?
Existing.
Right,
Yes.
If the
Yeah.
wall, right, existing, going down is
Correct.
dropping about 6 inches every foot?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that clarify? Does the board have any other comments or questions related to that, just while we're on the topic? I feel like you're still
So Matt, let me
struggling a little.
clarify.
I struggle a little bit with the
Yeah.
amount of runoff coming off of gates, potentially,
Yes.
and flowing into these properties, let alone seeping between the properties and flowing down. And so I'd like to understand more about how you're going to...
So our driveway is actually up 1 foot.
Keep going.
So if rainwater's on Gates Avenue, it should be continuing down. It's not, the point is
You're
not for
gonna
it to
raise it
turn and
1
come into a
foot
driveway.
above before it goes
Excuse
1
me?
foot above.
Yes.
So you have to go up, you're driving up, and then you're driving down.
So, no,
Create a high point, essentially.
yes,
Yeah, you're
yes.
creating a high point.
Yep. And again, the point was so that this development doesn't just take on all the rainwater. If we went down, if we followed the grade,
Yeah, you'd be...
we would be, this would be
like
the,
Niagara.
this would be the pond across the street would be
Yeah.
here.
Yes. Is there any curbing proposed, is there any existing curbing along Gates Avenue? Either block curbing, asphalt rolled curbing, is there any curbing proposed as part of this development? We discussed having a high point, but sometimes we have curbing that further helps to keep all this rainwater in the roadway and get it into the stormwater.
We are proposing granite block curbing along the frontage.
Where's that show?
Is there curbing on Gates Avenue currently?
Our survey says that, but I'm going to say no. Based on the, based on the crowd, I'm going to say no.
Show Belgian.
So Matt, by installing the Belgian block curbing, our intention,
Same time, the south side of Gates is all asphalt on the whole.
Yep.
It's
Asphalt berm.
The north side is actually a trench for the water flow, just to save you guys time.
And that is what is shown on the survey. I'm just pulling it up. It is showed as a rolled asphalt.
One person at a time, please. The board engineer is questioning the applicant's engineer, and those are the only two voices I'd like to hear.
I think just to clarify for everyone, the existing conditions survey does depict a rolled asphalt curb on the southern side of Gates Avenue. As described by Mr. Seckler, it appears that they will be upgrading that to a granite curb.
Correct.
So with depressed curbs along the driveways, probably, what, 1.5 to 2 inches?
Less than 2 inches, yep.
and the purpose of that, Mr. Seckler, is to keep the water on Gates running down the street to the existing stormwater systems as opposed to running on the lot through the property and then onto the neighbor down below, correct?
Correct, and there's an inlet at the end at the corner of Mitchell and Gates that this goes to.
And by what we're doing, is it going to increase any runoff off of Gates?
Not off of Gates, no.
All right, Mr. Seckler, we'll go on to the next part of the report, which is largely about utilities. Your testimony earlier relating to the sewer system was you will only connect, if if there's capacity granted for 2 houses, because it's 2 existing lots, you'll connect 2 houses at this time. There's no intention to have a septic system on a 3rd lot, and be
We'll
that what
wait.
it may, that might not be built for an unknown period of time until that's worked out with the sewer company. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Water service, there is water in Gates Avenue, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Electric, cable, internet services,
I think up above,
overhead?
yes.
Okay. All right, next topic. Stormwater management. We've touched upon this a little bit, and we've discussed a little bit about some of the road runoff. You know, I have questions and concerns related to stormwater management, some of which is outlined in the letter, and some additional comments that I have here. You know, what we have shown on the plans and what we have to review are, you know, a conceptual layout for where seepage pits may be. You know, have you done investigative work into the soil conditions here to see if seepage pits are even an appropriate type of stormwater management? If so, you know, has there been any preliminary calculations to how many, the sizing of these? Can they fit on the lot? Can they fit with the, you know, setbacks to neighboring properties? Can you provide, you know, a little bit more information on how this will be designed and what standard you will be designing them to?
Yeah, so we have not performed, I'd say, a field test of the stormwater capabilities of the soil. However, looking at, you know, the soil maps in the area, it looks like this is soil group type B, which would be fine sandy loam, which does allow for, you know, stormwater drainage, usually about a ½ inch to 1 inch per hour. Again, it's not down the shore sand, but it's also not, you know, stiff clay, but obviously we would have to do specific field testing to confirm that this location does have type B or similar soils. Obviously, as part of this application, we would do a mounding analysis to ensure that any type of infiltration that we're doing does not affect the groundwater on any adjacent properties. Obviously, we'd be sensitive to that.
Perhaps, sorry to cut you off, but I don't think that members of the public might be familiar with what a
I think there's
groundwater-
plenty of people here that know.
They might, but can you perhaps give a little bit more testimony on what a groundwater mounding analysis?
Yeah, so
does?
the one of the best management practices of stormwater is to get it back into the groundwater. Basically, instead of taking it, putting it in pipes and shipping it elsewhere, would be to get it back into the ground as it would in its natural case. In the natural case, some rain hits the ground and goes in here, some of it follows the grade and goes into our neighboring property. But in the proposed condition, we'll be capturing a portion of that and creating these seepage pits, which will allow for a concentrated area of stormwater to enter the ground. Now, the reason for doing groundwater analysis, mounding analysis, is to ensure that when we're putting the water into the ground, that does not create higher levels of groundwater elevation on neighboring properties. So it's, we're putting the water down the ground, it's to make sure the next door neighbor doesn't have stormwater rise in their basement or around their basement. So basically, the analysis looks at the impact, you know, how much are we increasing the natural groundwater through using seepage pits or that kind of point infiltration system.
Thank you for that explanation. You have not done that analysis yet, is that correct?
That is correct.
In the event that you do the analysis and you find that there are impacts to the neighboring adjacent property owners, are there ways to mitigate this? Can you design around this? Or is this a, you know, if that happens, does that kill the project?
No, I mean, we could locate the stormwater features elsewhere on the property to alleviate that. Again, I think there may be only the one, my guess is Lot A is the only one that, maybe Lot B as well, where we'd have to look at that. But again, we believe we'd be able to find another location on the property, and there's obviously other mitigation measures that we could look at if necessary, if there is a mounding analysis results in increasing the groundwater on neighboring properties.
When you design these seepage pits or other type stormwater management device, what regulations will you be designing them against?
The DEP regulations, so we'd be following those.
Is this a minor or major development as defined by the DEP?
Let's see. I think this could be a minor, but it's going to be close, is my guess.
I believe that was my assessment as
Yep.
well, is that the total acreage of the property is less than 1 acre. So
Correct.
it doesn't hit that threshold, and I believe.
And the disturbance is going to be under a quarter, I think,
Yeah,
but it's going to be close.
It's going to be very close.
Yes.
But it does look like this will be the minor development standards. the township regulations have a section on minor developments that will need to be adhered to. So at this time, though, again, just to repeat, that the analysis has not been done, the groundwater mounding analysis has not been done. You've graded the property, so can you speak on the impacts of the existing and proposed grading to, I'm most concerned on those downstream properties. How is this change directly uphill from them, this change in grading, this change in, again, we spoke about that the water on Gates Avenue is largely going to stay there, but we are changing the flow of some of the water on this property. Is that correct?
That is correct, and again, through the use of seepage pits, we're also looking at mimicking the existing contours as you get to the rear of the property, where contours, and 248, 249, 250, those lower contours near the neighboring property that fronts on Mitchell, we're basically, catching up to those contours in those general areas. So the grades in the rear of the site should be close to the same. I do obviously understand that in that list of approvals, we also need a lot grading permit application as well. So it's, this grading plan, I don't believe is superseding that. So we would have to come back and have the lot by lot grading plan as well.
Related to stormwater and related to these properties that are downstream, do you have a landscaping plan proposed?
We do not have one. Obviously, that's something we definitely could prepare. We do have landscape architects in our office. I mentioned earlier in terms of street trees, the applicant is, very interested in replacing street trees along Gates Avenue. So we would obviously provide a landscape plan similar to that as well.
How many existing trees on the site are being removed in total? I know it's shown on the demolition plan. Do you
I've
have
got a total
survey or
of-
Summary?
Yes, I've got an approximation of 27 on site, and then I believe there's around that number that's within the right-of-way, basically between our property line and Gates Avenue.
So an additional 27?
You asked on property, so it was 27, but there's about 27 that kind of line the street.
Gotcha, so we're at about 54 trees right there.
That's an
correct?
approximation.
And of course, removing trees has significant stormwater impacts. I think a landscaping plan is definitely very pertinent for this application, and especially, how that can assist those downstream properties with additional measures for infiltrating additional stormwater, not to mention to mitigate some of what they'll see from their property, and the like.
Yeah, and again, we would be happy to provide a landscape plan. I think, we would, the areas that we have that grade in the rear of the site, I think is a opportune location to try to find some, deer-resistant and slope-happy landscaping on that area.
I'm sure your landscape architect will have a very easy time finding those.
And again, if I may, again, subject to the review and approval of
Correct.
the engineer, the planner, both, and/or others, should the board so desire, should the board grant the application, correct? That's the step?
Yes, correct, Mr. Warner.
Regarding your description of street trees, are those, what we'd see in a more modern, like a planned development where you have, a cherry tree every 25 feet? Are those the type of street trees you're talking about removing and replacing? Or are they more natural, and is that how you intend to replace them?
The existing trees are natural. I don't think they were planted there. I think they just ended up, when the water traveled down Gates Avenue, it took with it a seed that then eventually sprouted into a tree. I think that's how they were formed. In terms of the existing, again, proposed, the applicant is very much in favor of street trees, whatever style that the municipality would like to see.
Okay, but nothing in mind at the moment, is that correct?
No.
All right, we've kind of veered off a little bit. I'm going to go back to the letter. Regarding environmental impact statement, again, some of this has been discussed. I wanted to hit on a couple key notes. You did talk about the DEP regulated areas and agreed to, get those absence determinations if approved by the board. Can you touch on the next three comments? Probable adverse impacts during construction and how those are mitigated.
Yep. So, yeah,
and the
for,
like, and alternatives. I think that's a, you know, an important thing to touch on.
yeah, so again, I think in terms of critical areas, the site itself, I wouldn't say has any sensitive areas in terms of natural resources, but in terms of critical areas in terms of slope. And again, that's primarily in the area of the western portion of the property, where, again, we sought to, through the use of the wall, and again, we're seeking a variance for the wall because we don't want to, have even more disturbance in the critical area located in the northwest portion of Lot A. As was mentioned, we would follow the best management practices of both this board and the Soil Conservation District as it relates to, super silt fence and the like, limit the areas of disturbance. I think you mentioned tying in the roof drains the second that the roof is on the building. Those type of mechanisms, I think, is what would be utilized during the construction of the site.
Last section of the report, before I go to some additional questions I have, are various outside agency approvals. Should this board view this application favorably, you would need to get all your outside agency approvals. That includes Soil Erosion Sediment Control, Morris County Planning Board, New Jersey American Water for both water and sewer, the lot grading plans, which we discussed, and I don't think I missed any, but if any of those are incorrect or you need to add any, we might want to just note that now.
I think that was a complete list, and we agree.
All right, now changing over to some questions I had from the testimony you gave earlier. I'm going to start at the beginning of your testimony and work back to the end.
If I can remember.
Yeah. So my first question relates to the discussion on Lot C. You said for the purposes of this presentation, it is orientated toward Mitchell Road, but that the applicant in your office deem it feasible that it would be possible to have frontage on Gates Avenue instead. Does changing the orientation from one road to the other reduce disturbance overall? Does it reduce disturbance to critical areas? Does it reduce any of the variances? Is there any benefit, is what I'm looking for changing it from what you proposed here? Or is this orientation, in your professional opinion, the best orientation?
We chose this orientation more so because we felt like the yard with the greatest activity other than the front yard is usually the rear yard. And that would put that rear yard would be onto the other lot that we're creating, which is the Lot B, as opposed to the existing neighbor that exists along Mitchell Road. So that was really one of the main reasons why we sought that. If someone's sitting on a patio, they're sitting on a patio facing this other development this other house we're creating, as opposed to an existing dwelling. So that was generally the thought behind it. I don't think it would change anything measurably as it relates to the grading plan, the zoning analysis. We basically just take it and rotate it 90 degrees. Again, we already have 2 front yard setbacks anyway. It's front yard either way. So again, I don't see there being a substantial difference for any of those other reasons, but really was so that the backyard wouldn't back up to an existing neighbor.
And that whole lot is going to be disturbed regardless of which way it's facing?
Yes, and again, that lot, in terms of critical areas, I don't think it had, just because the calculation pockets, but it's just because of the natural, when they cut the gravel driveway, likely just some, man-made fill created like a small little pocket. So there's not any critical areas along that property that I think are of a concern. So that's the general, I don't think there's any benefit otherwise.
Great. I want to turn my next series of questions are related to your aerial exhibits. So, this largely focused on the lot area. Did you do a comparison of the proposed lots to the existing neighborhood and the existing dwellings along Gates Ave as it relates to the size of the house, the lot coverage, and or how many of these dwellings also have critical areas on the lots?
So the only one that we were able to determine, because obviously in terms of critical areas, I don't know what was disturbed at the time of creation of these other houses. Likely it predates any ordinance in which there was a critical requirement.
Do we know what year most of these houses date back to?
On the road.
It's funny, it's normally this one that does, so.
I think he was trying to kick me and kick the thing out.
I got you.
In terms of the age of the houses or development of the houses, again, I imagine most, again, in looking at the development patterns in Long Hill, it probably is 1960 or earlier, but again, I didn't go house by house. We did create an exhibit, and I don't love the numbers on it because it's not data that I'm able to source definitively in terms of the floor area of these houses. This was the second sheet.
When you say floor area, is this,
The attempt.
say all floors, or is this just the ground floor area?
It was, we measured the ground floor and then looked at street view or walked the site to see if it was 1-story or 2-story. But again, it's from this, we're not sometimes able to get what portion of the house may be a 3rd story or a 2.5 story or has a basement that walks out. So that was what the goal of the second sheet in this exhibit was intended to do. So it does list the lot size and the floor area for a number of these lots. Again, it's limited just because I don't have the building permit information on every single property in Long Hill.
And to reiterate, what is the floor area for the 3 proposed, A, B, and C?
The floor area for the 3 proposed, and I think I went on the road without my notes. Floor area for A is 3,369 square feet. Lot B is 3,369 square feet, and Lot C is 1,728 square feet, all of which are compliant as it relates to the FAR.
Correct. So it looks like, in comparing to the numbers you have here, which you have said are, not confirmed 100%, but lots A and B seem to be larger than the ones in the neighborhood. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but again, it's difficult for me to tell. I mean, when I look at this image, the neighboring lot immediately to the west of us looks like it has a footprint that's very similar to ours. But again, not knowing what I see in terms of a generic potential floor plan for this site, I could get a pretty exact calculation. I can't do it for that one. Same thing with, I think it's actually, I think one of the other lots I thought was very similar. The one on Mitchell Road, that's next to us, the house itself looks very similar in size to our Lot C. Again, we're saying ours is 1,728, that the one on Mitchell Road is 1,684. It looks like it matches up because, again, it's a little bit easier to measure. I believe that's less stories than the, or less, different landing areas than some of these other properties.
And understanding that you're not asking for an FAR variance,
Correct, yes.
but you are asking for a lot coverage variance.
That is correct.
So has there been an analysis to the neighboring properties as to the existing, again, I know you can't, without going to survey every single lot, you can't get that precise, number, but have you done a general analysis as to the lot coverage on the neighboring properties to see how, this fits into the neighborhood? And
Yes, so what we had done is we actually looked, as it relates to lot coverage, generally how the properties, again, when you're walking the street, what you see from the street, meaning how long is the driveway, how big's the house. When you're walking the street, I can't tell how deep someone's backyard is. But if you look at a number of these other properties, the property next to us has a paved area that goes along the side of the house. That's the one that's next to us on Gates Avenue. The house that's located, I actually have house numbers listed here, so the one I was referring to earlier, I believe, was 29 Gates Avenue. That's the one that's immediately adjacent to us. I believe 36 Gates Avenue, again, has a driveway that goes basically past the house, a longer driveway, so that probably has lot coverage that's similar, at least in square footage, or greater. They may, obviously, their property is a little bit larger, so the percentage may be a little bit different. But again, when I looked at the properties, basically how long is their driveway, what's their footprint, we're generally consistent with that. Again, our lot, is smaller than some, bigger than others, so the percentage may be a little bit different.
Okay. I think that goes through these trees. You talked about with the building height that from Gates Avenue, this would be seen as a 2-story with a roof. Is that correct?
Correct.
What would what would you see from the two properties? There are lots 40 and 42. These are the two, one facing Mitchell and the one on the corner of Doherty, as well as the one in, what would they see?
So they would see a, let me pull up the site plan. Because I think I want to bring the grading plan up so that's. So again, from those properties, our closest point on property A, Lot A is 62.3 feet. Again, I know that you're looking at elevation, but I think we need to also understand the difference in distance. 62.3 feet where 25 feet is permitted. So the house technically, if we were more compliant with the front yard, would actually slide itself back. The other lot, again, that's the B lot, is 37.8 feet, where 25 feet again is permitted. And the last lot's actually a side yard, so it's 10 feet, and we're 23.9 feet off. In terms of what you would see, we have a small wall around some of the patio areas, basically to create a flat kind of walkout area. And then you would see portions of the basement and then the 2 stories above. I did, based on your conversations about landscaping, I think that it would be prudent to provide landscaping, either whether it's at the edge of the patio area, because that way it was the closest to the basement, so that it would basically cover up the majority of the basement. If you put the plantings further down the line, that's at a significantly lower grade, that it may not actually provide some of the screening. Again, it depends on your angle. If you put the downgrade, you'll be cutting off the site angle at the resident level, the neighboring property. If we put it up near us, then it'll likely be blocking that extra story, or the lower story. So I'm fine, we could do both. We could do plantings around the back, we could go plantings around the patio.
Do you have the grade change from the neighboring property just to the south to, where the patio is of that property?
Oh, the patio, yeah. So at our rear property line, you want me to go to the middle one, since that has the elevation at the rear property line is at about 248, and the patio is about, the patio is about 253, 254. So you're about
So you're looking up about a 5-foot
6
hill,
foot, right?
which will be grassed in nature?
Yes,
then
and planted or whatever.
landscapings and things like that, so it's about a 5-foot change in grade looking up, and then you'll see a patio, which, as we talked about, would be potentially screened with shrubbery and things.
Right. It has a wall, and then it would have a small, kneeling wall, and then the plantings.
And that's basically the same vantage point you would have on the neighboring property if you go one in on, not Mitchell, Doherty.
Correct. Yes.
Saying about a 5-foot change.
Yeah, I'm seeing 252 and 259, so about a 6 foot on that side.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that point, can we just go back to that for a second? So help me understand this. So you're going to raise that 10 feet, correct? You're going to infill about 10 feet to bring the garage floor, the driveway up, correct?
Yes.
10 feet, correct?
But is your question also, how much are we changing the grade in the rear at the house?
It will be.
Okay.
So you say you're going to raise it 10, you're going to infill 10 feet up in the front,
Yes.
correct? Right.
I'm sorry.
Dramatic effect, is that what you're going for, Dennis, after all this?
Gravity appears when you
Dramatic
least
effect.
expect it.
So and that leads into the garage. I presume there's nothing below the garage?
No.
Just, okay. Now, at the back of the garage, you're going to have how big a drop-off to the current grade?
Yep. So there is a wall there. So I think
Go ahead.
to help, I'll start with Lot A and I'll go down the line.
Uh-huh.
Lot A, the patio itself is at about 259-ish. And the existing grade there is about 256, 255. So the patio is going to sit on that one about 3 to 4 feet higher than what the natural grade elevation is at that spot.
That spot, right?
When I go to lot...
No. Keep,
Okay.
No.
All right.
Behind the garage.
Okay.
how high is that going to be from the grade once you've done the infill? You've got no basement there, correct?
Correct.
So how high is that piece going to be?
Yes, so that has a finished floor of 269. At the back of the house, it's about 257.
So about 10 feet.
Yes.
It's going to be 10 feet
Yes.
wall behind the house.
Correct.
There's no basement, so what's going to go there?
I assume
wall?
that, what?
You've got planter here. It says a planter. It seems like a very high planter.
Behind, yes, basically running along the side of the house, yes.
It's a very high planter. How are you going to even do anything? I'm trying to visualize a planter 10 feet high.
Well, it's going to be off the back of the house. You're basically going to, again, have a
Basement
wall
on the one side behind the garage. What's going to
Right,
be
yes.
behind the garage?
right here. Right, this is the lot A on the right-hand side. We have, again, the wall that helps separate that grade. So yes, that garage in the rear is going to sit 10 feet above the backyard out the back. So if you
Right.
if you created a door in the garage and you stepped out, you'd
You're gonna
fall
down
10 feet. Yes.
Or into a nice planter that's 10 feet high.
Right. Well, no. The planter will be at the grade of the garage, and then you'd basically you fall off the wall. Then you fall off the
You go
wall.
for the planter first, then you fall off the
Yes.
planter.
Yeah. Then you fall off the planter.
So
Yes.
how are you going to get to the planter to plant anything? So you've got a whole big, whatever it is, I'm being flippant a bit, but you've got a big structure off the back and side that's not a basement,
Right.
but it's a sheer wall of some description, whatever that's going to be.
Right. It'll just be basically filled foundation wall.
Where is the fill coming from?
I think that bodes the question, is there a net fill on the site, or is there a net cut on the site?
I think we're going to be a fill here.
Going to be a fill, so
Yeah.
there will be material imported.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how many cubic yards you're bringing in?
I haven't done the calculations for this.
That was intentional.
Next up, I would like Ms. Lehaney to ask her questions, but before we do that, I would like to propose we take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes, exactly.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're back on the air.
5 minutes, folks. Okay, we have it quiet. Ms. Lahaney,
Hi.
your
Okay.
questions.
Thank you. So, Mr. Secklish, so you provided the planning testimony, and I actually want to step back, maybe 10,000 square feet, and just actually talk about the subdivision itself, rather than the homes right now. So you need variances for minimum lot size on all three proposed. You have 20,000 square feet is required. You have proposed Lot A is 13,511, proposed Lot B is 11,730, and proposed Lot C is 8467. And then you need a variance for lot width on corner lot, proposed Lot C. And it's, I think you said in your testimony, it's 81 feet on Mitchell Road, and I think it's 91 feet on Gates.
Correct.
So I know you saw my letter. And so I guess my question is, are you arguing this relief for these variances under the C2 flexible C criteria?
Yes, we're using the C2 flexible C criterion, saying that the lot sizes and dimensions are more consistent with the neighborhood and therefore would be a better planning alternative.
Okay, so here's the question for you. I looked at, you have a couple of exhibits, and one, in my letter, I had noted, what you define as a neighborhood is a little, it's not concrete. In my letter, suggested 200 feet because people who live within 200 feet have to get noticed for this hearing, right? So that's essentially, the MLUL might say that's the neighborhood because those are the people who legally have to be told about this potential subdivision. And so I noticed on the one graphic that you show the 200-foot radius. And there were, I think, 11 properties that I counted, not including the 3 proposed, but the 11. And then beyond that, you put a couple of properties beyond that, there are like 13, sort of, that, including 2 that are slightly beyond. And I noted you didn't do them across Mitchell Road, where the lots are a little bit larger, and I think you think,
Well, it's also there's also a different zone. I believe it's an R3 zone across the street.
Okay. So let me just talk about the 13 lots.
Yep.
Sorry, okay. So if we're not including those 3 lots, I saw that 2 conform. As you mentioned, very few of them meet the 20,000 square feet. I think very few, only 2 out of the 13. But of the remaining 11, only 2 lots are less than the 3 that you have proposed. So meaning your largest lot is 13,511, and there are only 2 lots of the 13 existing that are smaller than that.
And again, you're referring to the 13 within the 200 foot.
There's 11 within the 200
Okay.
feet, and then you showed 2 sort of outside
Okay.
the 200 feet.
Yep.
So I also note that one of the 13 lots is smaller than proposed Lot C, and none of them are as small as proposed proposed Lot B, and none of them are as small as proposed Lot C. So when I did the average of those 13 lots, I got around 16,000 square feet. And when I took out those 2 other, 2 that were outside the 200 square feet, I also got around 16,000 square feet. So you have currently 2 lots that total about 33,000 square feet. So I guess my question for you is, would it not be a better zoning alternative to have 2 lots that are just over 16,000 square feet?
I guess I'd have to see, again, how the houses lay out. Obviously, again, we looked at it, let's walk the street as, okay, you're walking the dog from one end of the street to the other end of the street. I understand that, as the bird flies 200 foot or 500 foot, obviously included different houses than my, walk the street from one end to the other calculation. Obviously, again, we feel that the way these houses kind of lay out are appropriate, but obviously, the averages, end up where they end up. So if it's, 2 lots at 15 or 16, again, I think they may also end up in the middle of the pack, like I said, similar to our walk the street version of it as well.
So would that not be a better zoning alternative?
I don't know I think they're both appropriate. I don't know if one would be better than the other, I guess.
Okay.
I think they both are leaning on the same concept of the fact that they look like most of the other lots in the area, depending on, again, if you're doing the circle or you're doing the line, basically. I took the line alternative, you took the circle alternative.
Well, let me ask you this. So you did Gates Avenue. Do you know the length of Gates Avenue that you did? Because I would think some of those would be...
Yeah, it's probably about 800 feet, I think.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not sure that you would even consider those houses. I mean, yes, they are literally on Gates Avenue, but they're almost not in the same neighborhood, right? Those people would never get noticed for this hearing.
I'm sure some of them are here, though.
Well, maybe. But I guess I'm having a hard time with that concept is if, obviously you want to have lots that meet the minimum lot size of the zoning. I think you make a compelling case that not many of these do, but they're still more than what you're proposing. And I guess my question is, if you would have, had you considered how you can make that argument that it's a better zoning alternative to have the 3 when you could have 2 that are actually much more consistent with the neighborhood.
Yeah, and again, I just to go on the record of why I did the straight line, I think it's probably just as convenient if you were walking or driving to get to the end of, by the end of Gates, I mean Gates at the end of the next intersection, than it is to come out Gates, walk to Mitchell, walk down, and walk around basically on Dougherty and go to like the 3rd house in. Like that walking distance is probably, similar to 600 feet, which would have taken you basically to the other end of Gates. But again, I understand that I understand what you're saying is that, if they're a little bit larger than what we're proposing, then it likely puts it in, based on how you're measuring it, in more in the center, more in the median. In that case, again, that's what our argument is. We're just using a different sample, I guess.
So then the other question I have is, did you do, I know you need a variance for lot width for just one of them. Proposed lot A, proposed lot B meet the 100-foot requirement. Proposed lot C is deficient. Did you do a similar analysis with the lot widths along the streets?
We did not. I think it's probably, again, as you go west on Gates, some of the lot widths become smaller. So again, I think we're gonna have that same issue where it may be outside the 200, might be within the 500 to 800 or 400 to 800 distance where the lot widths probably are a little more deficient. I think our neighboring properties, the immediate properties to our west, I think are all between like 100 and 110 or 115 feet, which is generally where our A and B lots fall within. The corner lot, which is the one that we're deficient on, the one across the street from us on Mitchell is, I think, longer on Gates and shorter on Mitchell than us. It's more rectangular, ours is more square. I think the ones, if you were to turn the corner on Mitchell, I think both of those are, the one that's solely on Mitchell, I think is a little bit narrower than our lot. I think it's definitely deeper, but I think it's narrower. And the next one down on Dougherty, I think is less on Mitchell by a little bit, but much longer on Dougherty because it's, again, more rectangular than square.
Okay, so I guess maybe my question for the board is if you would want to see that analysis. And the reason I ask is if one of the criteria that I lay out in my letters, the board has to look, would this subdivision create lots that are more in keeping with what exists on the ground? And so if they're saying, listen, we meet the 100 feet, we're just short on area, well, what if everybody else has 150 feet? So, I mean, I guess that's my argument, and perhaps, would you like to?
And again, I mean, I could show on the exhibit. And This is the third sheet of A1. And I'll just grab my notes real fast because I have the address numbers so I could refer to these instead of just red boxes and green boxes. So 29 Gates, which is the next property down, looks to have, I guess, if I had my scale out in my hand, I'd be able to measure, but that has a very similar lot width as what we're proposing on A and B. Same thing with the next one, which is 35, and same thing with 45. Those three all look like they have, again, between 100 and 115 feet lot width.
I'm sorry, can you give me those three lots again?
Yes. Oh, I'm giving address numbers, not lot numbers, if that's okay.
What were they again?
Address was 29 Gates, 35 Gates, and 45 Gates.
Thank you.
Across the street, 18 Gates is wider. It looks like that's probably in the range of 130 or so, but I could measure it if I need to. 26 Gates looks to be in the range of about 100. 26 looks to be about 100, and 36 Gates looks to be about 100 as well. Those are the next two properties within the 200 foot. As I mentioned, when you turn the corner on Mitchell, again, this is the one that fronts on Mitchell. This is 10 Gates. That one, again, shallower less width on Mitchell, more width on Gates than our corner lot. We're more square. Same thing as you go down on Mitchell, again, shallower on Mitchell, but longer on Doherty. These are the two as you go south. I think that was generally the ones that front that 200 foot, if that's...
And just to be clear, the two opposite on the north side of Gates, how many properties map against your south side? Is that two?
Excuse me, what'd you say?
On the north side of Gates, how many? That's two, right?
There's two here.
And then how many on the south side for you guys?
Oh, I gave 1, 2, 3, 4.
Let me start again.
Oh, how many are directly across?
Yes.
Okay. 2 are directly across from us.
And you will be 3, directly opposite will be 3.
We'll be 3 directly opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So for me, gauging is north side in terms of what lot width. Correct?
Correct. I mean, again, comparatively, we have more width on Mitchell. The property that fronts on Gates and Mitchell is more rectangular, so it's less depth.
Sort of what you're doing with C.
What?
Which is similar to C, correct?
Oh, C, we're square, they're rectangle, but yes.
But lengthwise.
Yes, that area is, I don't know if I have it in front of me, but I could probably get that area when I
Just
sit
to put
back
you out of
down.
your misery.
What do you say?
Just to get through this quicker.
Yes.
So I'm with Liz. 16,000. If you're going to try and map it to the neighbourhood and try and get that neighbourhood feel, I think you should have done that and considered the average. And look opposite. You've got 2 lots directly opposite, and they're trying to squeeze 3 into something that's 2 opposite, right? So in terms of mapping and looking like a neighbourhood, it's difficult to feel why 3 is really fitting in.
Well, there is a third. I would have to get the pure measurement. Again, we're a little bit more
Doesn't matter.
angular. There is a third property.
That's behind.
That's
not
behind.
fronting on Gates.
Correct, but they basically have 3 in their
Not interested.
little
What's
piece.
fronting on Gates?
On fronting on Gates, there's only 2.
Correct. Versus your, how many?
3.
Okay.
I have no additional comments right now, Mr. Chair.
You have no more comments?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay.
She's reserving a right, though.
Yeah,
Just in case of...
Mr. Warner, do you have any questions?
Just a couple of quick ones, if I may, just for clarification purposes, based on the testimony, Mr. Seckler, that you provided, in particular in response to the questions by Ms. Laney, our planner. You said you were, the applicant was pursuing with respect to lot area, C2, flexible C, benefits substantially outweighing the detriments as the basis for the variance relief being sought by the applicant.
Board Attorney, I'm sorry, can you move the microphone closer to you?
Benefits substantially outweighing the detriments, C2 is what the applicant is pursuing with respect to the lot area, 3 lot area variances, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I assume, but I don't want to assume, so correct me if I'm wrong, the applicant is not pursuing C1 undue hardship with respect to the 3 lot area variances, presumably because the argument would be that those would be self-created hardships because the applicant is proposing to subdivide the lots, the 2 lots into 3 lots, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so C2 only for the lot area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is the applicant seeking C2 only for the lot width, for the 2 lot width deviations for Lot C? On the same theory, or is it a different?
No, that would
or is the
be-
applicant seeking it alternatively under C1?
That would be C2 as well.
C2 only, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And are there any other of the variances that the applicant is only seeking under C1, or is the, only seeking under C2, or is the applicant seeking any of the other variances under C1?
Potentially some of the variants as they relate to wall height, any development on this property because of the significant grade change, which is unique topography issue, would fall, I think could be argued with under the C1 variance. Obviously, this, and going back to the corner lot situation, the lot inherently has obviously a limited width on one of the properties. So whether this was a 2-lot subdivision, 3-lot subdivision, or just a single lot, you'd have limited width on Mitchell, just inherently from the creation of these lots.
But if we were to isolate the 3-lot area variances, the only thing the applicant is arguing is C2 because the C1 will be a self-created hardship.
Correct.
Lot area.
Lot area, correct. Lot area would definitely be
The
C2.
3-lot area variances.
But the
One
width
for
on
lot-
Mitchell is
Understood. The one for Lot A, the one for Lot B, and the one for Lot C, those 3-lot area variances, the applicant is only seeking C2 because C1 would be a self-created hardship, correct?
Correct.
correct.
Okay. And if I understand, with respect to the C2 argument for the 3-lot area variances, you've already testified with respect to the benefits of, the better planning alternative could be argued either way, be it 2 16,000 square feet lots or the 3 lots as proposed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then, am I correct, Ms. Laney, if she were to take the position that 2 lots were at least as good a zoning and planning alternative than the 3 lots as proposed, you would not testify under oath as an expert licensed professional planner that she was being unreasonable in taking that position, correct?
So we stated that our 3-lot alternative, because of the street that we're on, when we looked at the entire street, was a better alternative. But again, I wouldn't say that Liz's beliefs in terms of, again, had a very similar feeling in looking at the neighborhood. Our reasons, I would say, is the same. We're using the same support to come
Her
up with.
position wouldn't be unreasonable if she took the alternative position that it was at least as good a zoning and planning alternative for the 2 lots as opposed to the...
Correct. I'm arguing ours is better, but I can't say that hers is unreasonable because
Hers would not be unreasonable.
the background is the same. The background is the same.
Understood. And am I correct that as proposed, there are 29 variances sought by the applicant? And I get 29 by doing 3-lot areas, 2-lot widths, that's 5. 1, 2, 3 front yard setbacks, that's 8. 1, 2 combined side yard setbacks, that's 10. 3-lot coverage deviations, that's 13. The 2 retaining wall heights, that's 15. The 3 lots in which there's some building in the critical area, that's 18. Contiguous non-critical land with direct access to street, there are 2, that's 20, I believe. Did I lose track already? And there's a front yard setback in critical area for all 3 lots of 0, and rear yard setback in critical area for all 3 lots of 0 versus 50 feet. And then side yard setback, it's 0 for all 3 lots versus 25 feet, so that's another 9. That's 29 variances, am I correct in that number?
Based on your counting, it appeared that way. Again, some of the critical disturbance, I think there's pockets.
The 38 feet, that's the one I skipped, my apologies. Sir, please.
Want to help you?
There were 2 height variances of
Your math is
38
not
versus
incorrect.
35. So It's approximately 29 variances, if not perhaps
Your
more
math is not
arguably.
incorrect.
What's
I
that?
said your math is not incorrect.
Okay, thank you. Would it be true that if there were only two 16,000 square foot lots created, did I get that 16,000, approximately 16,000 square foot lots created, there could be less than 29 variances required for the application?
My assumption is that well, we're not eliminating the lot area. You'd still have lot area variances.
still
You're
be
not
three.
limiting, you're probably all of the disturbance ones may also be required
Well,
because.
actually, there wouldn't be
disturbance.
3 lot area deviation.
It'd be
There
two,
would
right, yeah,
correct.
so, right.
The answer, Mr. Warner, is yes.
There'd be less, but limited reductions, yes.
Okay. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair.
All right, continuing with the question, Ms. Dill.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I just have a few loopholes to close up. So I want to start with the trees. You were talking about removing approximately 54 trees, but previously you testified that you wanted to leave, I assume, some sort of row of trees that bordered lot 15. Would you be leaving those, or would you be removing them and then replanting them?
No, there's a pocket of, let me get you the number, 1, 2, 6, 7, about 14, 15 trees or so that look to be, that would be able to maintain outside the disturbance on the northwest portion of the property.
Right, okay. And then same for the trees that would border lot 40. Would you be removing any and replanting them there?
There is none close to the property line. There's one that's just outside of the garage footprint that will be removed. I don't know if you see it on sheet C2. There's a tree with an X near the existing garage. All the remainder trees in the rear of the site are to be maintained.
And then you were talking about the walls that are going to be installed by the driveways and then by the patios. Are you planning on installing any walls on any of the borders of the properties?
No.
Okay. And then can you clarify for me if the slope, does it slope down into lot 15 or does it slope the other way?
You, lot 15 meaning the property to our west?
To the west, yes.
There is a very small portion up near the property corner where looks like there's a small low point basically right at the property line. The remainder of it generally flows actually into our property.
The other way, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Again, there's
all
a
right.
very
That's what I
small
thought. I
portion
just wanted to make sure.
of existing.
Okay, and then I want to talk for a minute about the seepage pits because, let me get to the right page. I guess we can use C3 still. It looks like all 3 of them are going to back up to lot 40. Is that right?
Generally, you would have them at the lower grades in order to facilitate gravity helping the water getting to a
Right.
specific point. So the lowest point of our property tends to be near the property line of the rear lot line, lot 40.
So can you just describe them for me? Because I'm not familiar with them. Like, what do they look like? What are they made of? Are they in the ground? Are they above the ground?
In the ground.
Okay.
In the
Fully?
ground. I think we actually might have a detail.
I think it was removed from.
It was removed from the plans. We used to have a detail on the plans. Essentially is a chamber underground in which it would basically allow for infiltration and water to be directed from the roof leaders into the ground. And basically it's a chamber that has a mix of stone and soil, which allows, again, basically you create a void in the ground and you basically trap the rainwater there and let it infiltrate into the ground, that location, and basically holds it back. It's almost like a underground detention basin that you'd have like under the parking lot,
Yeah, I have
but
one.
in the grass.
Okay. And then, so I guess like I'm just worried that many seepage pits are bordering one property. And is there any concern that that much water being held against another property could cause any damage to lot 40?
Well, so that's what the mounding analysis and that other analysis that's been requested us to perform would basically to ensure that, one, it's sized appropriately so it could hold what we're sending that direction, and then that when it does infiltrate, it doesn't adjust or change the groundwater below the surface. The other thing to remember is that right now, almost anything that hits this property eventually ends up on the adjoining property, like the natural grade of the
You mean
ground.
existing now?
Existing now.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're adding impervious, and that's what
Sure.
the seepage pit's point is basically to, okay, we're adding impervious, we need to hold it back. But the rest of the ground, any other water that hits here, either goes into the ground, just like our backyards. If it goes in the ground, it'll just, seep through the soil, or runs over the ground, and into that property in the rear of us now.
And then what, you might not have an answer for this off the top of your head, but if it were to be 2 lots, what would the seepage pits look like then? I assume the same positioning, rear, east.
They would still be in the rear. There would be 2 of them instead of 3 of them.
Yeah.
Likely the same size because, again, unless the house is actually larger, then you may need a little bit larger of a seepage pit. Because your FAR, your calculations, again, all the impervious coverage calculations we could increase that by ordinance. But so the seepage pit may get larger, but we would only have 2 of them instead of 3.
Okay, and then just my last one, to come back to the trees, are there any trees you would be removing and not replacing, or are you gonna go tree for tree?
Again, I don't know if there's a tree replacement ordinance. I don't know if we would fall within it or would
I'm
be
just wondering what your
exempt.
plan is.
Oh, I think we would be looking to plant. I don't know if we're looking to replant every single tree. Some of those trees that are out there are, like I said, not substantial. They were just basically a leftover remnant
Okay.
of
Are there
a
any like
seed.
ash trees on the
I
property?
mean, there are some larger trees on the property that, again, we'd look to replant. But I'm not a landscape architect. I don't know the species of trees that were out there.
Okay, all right, great.
But I'd say
that's all I have.
generally we'd be looking to
Most of
replant,
them.
but I can't promise it's one for one
Okay.
in this location.
Yeah, I was told by the applicant that he would do his best to replace as many trees as were reasonable. Obviously, diameter breast heights and things will vary. We're not going to replace twigs with an 8-inch, DBM, but generally speaking, it's the theory being a 1-to-1.
And sometimes, the way that these trees were spaced in natural form is not how you would replant trees. I mean, there's a lot of trees right on top of each other. That's not the best condition when you're replanting new trees.
Okay. I'm sure there'll be time for opinion later, but thank you very much. There's a little bit of concern, arguably a lot of concern for largely Lot 40, which is bearing the brunt of this, but thank you for your presentation.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for taking my last question. Well done. I did notice that there were a couple of ashes on the property, and some of them were already dead. So I would expect that there's probably more ashes, and the Emerald Board is probably going to take out a few more, just over a normal course of action. With regards to sewer, the current existing building, is that a septic?
I don't believe we found any septic on site, so I believe it was connected.
So there might be an existing pipe to,
I believe so.
so, okay. And the objective is to have the 3 future homes connected to the sewage.
However long that takes.
Well, that's up to American Water. The Lot B, if I was to look at the southwest corner of that building, very similar to the southwest corner of Lot A, that building, what would I be seeing?
You're referring to the garage?
Yes.
Okay, so similar to that.
Exact same question
Yep.
as Lot A.
And basically almost the same answer. The finished floor in the garage is at elevation 264. The back wall of the garage is at about 255. So you'd have basically a similar foundation basically being
So if
shown.
you're looking at a wall maybe 6 feet tall at that point?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, you may have, siding up to a point and things like that.
Mhm. But it's not going to be like Lot A, which is like a 10-foot wall.
The grading on, again, the western side of the property is steeper, and then as you go east, it flattens.
Tapers
It
off.
relatively flattens, because it's not flat anywhere.
Mhm.
But as you go east, it flattens, so the grade difference is slightly less on the B garage than the A garage.
Okay, thank you. There's no ask for any kind of wall for Lot C? Or any grade adjustment when you're fronting on gates?
Nothing where you're fronting on gates. I think there's a small wall between B and C on the property line, but nothing on C itself.
So there's nothing to take up if you had a driveway? The driveway is projected to be off of Mitchell or off of Gates?
It's projected to be off of Mitchell.
It's going to be off of Mitchell. Okay, so it'll be a Mitchell address? Possibly.
But I don't know how the
Okay.
postmaster
Okay.
decides it. Or the tax assessor, I don't know.
Yeah,
who makes
fair
that
enough.
call.
Fair point. I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. I don't have many questions. It's more about why. Why take one undersized lot and combine it to make 3 undersized lots? Why geographically looks very problematic to build a house in the location you have in A? That amount of infill concerns me. So, and I think I agree with Liz, if you're going to do some sort of analytics to determine what suits best, I think what you came up was more appropriate, both, and then the frontage, and just try and look something similar to the immediate neighborhood of 200 feet. So my only question is why. The thoughts were this was what you wanted to present.
And again, we went with the lot width being generally compliant. We looked at it and said 100 feet is what's required along Gates Avenue. We went 100 feet from the left side to the right, drew a property line. Again, it ended up being 106 or so, 110. Went the next lot about 100 feet, and then we had a remainder, which was 91 feet. That was a remainder on Gates Avenue. So the spacing along Gates Avenue, if you drove by, was generally consistent with the zoning at 100 feet. The lots are not as deep. Understood, we don't have the depth on this property that maybe some of the other larger lot sizes have. But we sought to mitigate the lot depth issue by respecting and enhancing the rear yard setbacks, increasing that well beyond what was permitted, and moving the houses up closer to Gates, where actually it's generally in line with the other houses on Gates.
And that's the only point I would agree, bringing the houses up front. That's the only point. Okay, I've finished.
Mr. Malinowski?
Yes, I think most of my questions were already asked, most of our professionals, in leaning towards the 2 lots. When you did your comparison to other lots in the neighborhood, did you look at anything else? Other, like, for instance, did you see side yard setbacks, lot coverage, to see how they fit into the neighborhood with what you're proposing?
Yeah, and again, I think, I would honestly say the Exhibit A1, Sheet 3, which I realize I probably should use the handout because I'm probably referring to that more than anything. When I look down the line, and I'm going to start with House 26, which is I guess I'll just stand up so I can point this.
I do have a copy here,
So I would say the lot immediately across the street from us on Mitchell, that fronts on Mitchell, is somewhat unique. This definitely does not meet rear yard setback or side yard setback, or front yard, depending on how they calculated their zoning. Then the flip side of that is you have the unique lot. You basically have these 2 unique lots right across from us. The next one is the ones on Gates. It's the conforming lot size and the house all the way in the rear. Likely doesn't meet the rear yard setback, clearly meets the front yard. Next house on Gates definitely does not meet front yard, definitely does not meet side yard as it relates to the western property. That's house number 26 on Gates. Next one down the line is number 36. Again, definitely does, likely does not, it's probably close. It looks like it has a rear garage that likely has a side yard setback variance, but has a front yard setback variance, I would imagine. Next house is 44, looks like it has front yard and side yard variance. I'll jump to the other side of the street.
The front yard, I
Yeah.
realize they're all going to have front yards.
But definitely has a side yard variance on the left side or west side, looks like it has. Going down, I'll start now from the lot that is closest to us, which is 29. That one, difficult to tell if it has a side yard setback or not. Obviously, as I mentioned, front yard definitely has. Next one down is number 35. That one, again, may have a side yard on the west side, difficult to tell. Number 45 looks like it does have a side yard variance on the west side, and then we go down the line again. Definitely front yards, maybe one of the two green lots has a side yard, but it'll be close. And again, generally, I would say there's probably half of the lots on this stretch have a side yard variance. Again, not all of them are evenly spaced perfectly in the property.
Excuse me. You're saying that half the lots have a side yard variance. Are you certain that they have variances in place that were granted at the appropriate time by an appropriate board? Or are you guessing that there might have been a variance based on today's zoning ordinance?
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I can may address that. As he was saying it, in my mind, I'm saying to myself, I don't want to drive Deborah crazy, but perhaps I should get the resolutions. What I've heard here from the planner is that there are questions. I've heard that there's analysis that is requested of the planner. I've heard a lot of the board's comments. And perhaps at this point, Mr. Chairman, it would behoove all of us if we were to take the information that's been provided and we do this analysis more formally in keeping with Ms. Lehenny's requests, and that we come back at a different time to address those specific questions and perhaps revisit our...
Counselor, I appreciate the fact that you're trying to divert from my question, but my question specifically was, he's using the word variance as if, in fact, he knew that those lots with substandard side yards asked for and received variances. And the fact that they are smaller setbacks than the current ordinance is worth noting. But whether or not that is because of a variance or not, do you have proof?
No, I would imagine most are pre-existing nonconformities and not variances that were sought
I like
and
those
received.
words much better than inferring that there must have been a variance.
Understood, and I apologize for using the wrong terminology.
I'm sorry, you were answering Mr. Malinowski.
I think I made it far enough down the street. It looks like about half of them had potentially pre-existing nonconformities as it relates to side yard.
Thank you, that answered that question. And with regard to lot coverage, did you, and I don't want you to...
I didn't...
to guess again.
I said, I think a couple of them may, but it's much more difficult for me to calculate that on the fly. And again, I think as my counsel mentioned, if that is a request, I think we could do a better job of presenting that in table form than me guessing on the fly.
All right, and then the one additional item of concern would be the amount of fill that's going to be brought in as existing
We can do
plans.
that calc too for you.
'Cause it seems like you're raising
It's
a lot
important.
For all lots, right? All three lots?
Yeah.
If that's,
Well, for all three, or
Definitely A,
for
though.
two.
Definitely A, yeah.
I'd
In
rather
your
see
opinion,
something with two.
Mr. Sackler, would all three lots need to be developed at the same time in order to achieve the grading that's shown on the plans? Maybe not all three houses built, but would the grading and essentially the fill all need to be brought in at the same time?
It's possible that C, depending on which order they go in, I know that the applicant intends, again, to have a family member live in C, so I don't know if he is going to start there, or he would start with one of the other ones. So it's possible that C, if you're just doing C, you may not need to deal with what's going on in A, or vice versa, but...
Well, then, given that, I think if you could do a cut fill analysis that's for all three at once, and then C individually with A and B separate, just so we can kind of look at those numbers and compare that. Or if it's going to be a different layout or anything, potentially, be that what it may, and the analysis as such.
Yep.
That's it.
Did you have any more, Tom?
Nope, that's it.
I have a question. I think I heard you talk about getting sewer connections to start building. Did you make a statement? And if so, would you repeat it?
I think I stated that the applicant does not intend to use a septic system, so they would build whatever they're permitted to by the sewer connections, and whatever they are not permitted to have at this time in terms of service, they would not obviously construct. If it's one unit they can't construct, or 2 units they can't construct, they would hold.
Do you have some written authority from the sewer company that connections are available?
I don't have anything written, but I do believe that the existing house had a connection, so I believe that the credit or usage from that property would still be available. That's my understanding. I do not have...
You are aware of the sewer moratorium?
Correct, yes.
And you are aware that the sewer moratorium allows the company to connect new residences where existing sewer trunk lines exist?
Correct.
Do you know that existing sewer trunk lines exist to serve these lots?
I believe there is. Sorry.
Do you know for certain?
I believe there's sewer service currently in this neighborhood that...
There is no doubt sewer service in this neighborhood. Do you know if there's a sewer trunk line that is available to connect to these properties within the limits of the sewer moratorium?
I do not.
Would you find out, please?
Certainly.
I have it in my notes, Mr. Chairman.
And if it turns out that a connection is not available until the sewer moratorium is lifted, and if it's necessary to put in septic systems in order to develop these lots, are these lots big enough to hold both the dry wells for runoff as well as septic fields?
We have not run that analysis, so I can't say one way or the other.
Thank you. At this point, the members and the professionals have asked their questions. It's time to take questions from the audience. And I see one volunteer. Do you have the microphone? Take
It's right there. You can take that.
Bring your own.
the microphone and speak into it, because we all want to hear what your question is. Now, remember, we're talking about questions of the testimony that the engineer has given.
Yes.
1 second.
If you start with your personal opinions or comments or alternatives, we're going to have to ask you to sit.
Okay, I'm going to try my hardest to stick to that.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Mr. Chair, do we want to make a motion, because we're at 20 after?
Yeah, let's extend to 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock's fine with me. Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
First, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jessica Alon. I live at 40 Mitchell Road. So my property runs, can I use this map?
But before you do, can you spell your last name?
Alon,
you, Mr.
A-L-A-A-N.
Thank you.
So I'm at 40 Mitchell,
Yep.
which it has not been highlighted at all as part of the neighborhood, but this is my property right here. And so the front of my property, I look out onto 6 acres of land with a beautiful pond in front of me. I don't know, have any of you had the opportunity to come out to the subject property? You're also welcome to walk my property line. I'm giving you permission. So just if you ever want to see my angle of the situation, you're more than welcome to come. I actually work here in Long Hill Township in the schools. We've lived here for 5 years. I volunteer for Girl Scouts. I'm the co-chair of the Education Foundation. My husband's on the rescue squad, and a softball coach for Little League. So to say that we have an invested interest in this town might be just a slight understatement. I'm going to try, I had some notes prepared, but some of my questions have been answered, so I'm going to attempt to change my statements as best as possible.
Okay, would you please ask questions very soon? I mean, we appreciate your biography. but
Okay.
the question
So my
period.
first question
For
is,
the benefit of the members of the public who may know, after all the questions are asked, ultimately you'll have an opportunity to make your comments.
Okay.
I'll swear everybody
Okay.
in. That's testimony. This is just questions based upon the testimony from Mr.
Okay.
Seckler. As an engineer and as a planner, he testified as both.
okay. That may limit me because I would say I might have more comments than questions. I know he did mention that the trees on my property line are not affecting my property. I do have 4 trees, so I guess I'm curious how that was assessed, knowing I have approximately 4 trees leaning over my daughter's bedroom that are the property of the subject property. So I'm not sure who assessed or how that was assessed that the trees did not impact my property, Mr. Seckler.
I don't have a microphone, so I'm gonna have to scream.
We can share.
I could just use Liz's.
So I don't think I stated that the trees won't be affected. I think they won't be affected, meaning that we won't be removing them. If you want, I could show you on C2. All of the trees that are not crossed out will be remaining. So other than this one tree near the garage, all the rest of these trees are going to stay.
So all of the trees leaning over my daughter's bedroom from the subject property will remain?
I don't know where daughter's bedroom is here, but other than this one tree that's next to the garage, all the rest of these will remain. So
So there's about 4 trees right here
correct.
that are leaning over.
We will not be touching those trees.
Despite the fact that they're the subject property's trees, and they are impacting my property negatively.
You want the tree removed?
Those trees, yes, because
Oh.
if they fall over, they're going to.
Okay. Sorry, I was thinking the other way around.
Well,
I get if obviously I'm not the applicant, but if you make the request here that there's a couple trees you want removed, I'm sure while they're out there they can remove them as well. Most people want trees to stay, so
yeah.
sorry for jumping.
We will definitely need trees to replace those trees, knowing that the impervious surface is going to be increased significantly. I might struggle here because I don't know how many questions I can come up with based on the information provided.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Were you able to explore how many variances would be required? I think this was sort of touched on if we had 2 houses on the property.
I think, as board counsel mentioned, obviously anything that we have 3 of, because of the fact we have 3 lots, would be reduced likely to 2. We'd still need a lot area variance. We would still need potentially the height variances, the steep slope, or the critical areas. So it would only reduce the fact that some of our variances are grouped in thirds. Instead, they would be grouped in 2s.
Okay. Were you able to explore how many variances would be needed for 1 house on the property?
I have not run that analysis. There likely would still be a set of variances, again, because of the limited frontage on Mitchell, along with, potentially the steep slope and some of those other variances as it relates to the ground itself.
Okay. I actually do have a blueprint or a drawing of what 1 house would look like with no variances. I don't know if now is a time that I could pass that around to board members?
No.
No.
Not at this time.
Okay.
At the end, when you can offer your own comments and suggestions.
Okay. So there is a way to actually build a house on 1 house on that property with no variances. I think the rest may be comments for now. I believe this was addressed, but again, my understanding of some of these things is lacking. So if there's 10,000 square feet of new impervious coverage, it's my understanding that the new DEP environmental standards need to be followed. Will we have over or above the 10,000?
We were right around and right below 10,000.
Okay.
And I think that's what the board engineer was getting at, was that based on our calculation, we're right below it. Obviously, if there's any change one way or the other, it could move it above or move it below.
Okay.
And is there a complete list that has all the boxes checked?
I'm sure with the application, we had
What-
submitted a checklist.
What do you mean?
Just a list of everything that needs to be submitted?
I believe, if I may, I believe the application was deemed complete.
Okay.
And that's, the application and the checklist are all on the website.
Okay. Okay, I think those are all my questions. I will be back with comments.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul White. I live at 25 Darty Avenue, just outside the 200-foot circle, I guess you'd say. Mr. Sickler, if I could, am I saying your name right? Sickler?
Close enough.
Mr. S?
Seckler, but it's close enough.
I want to be respectful. Very good. Mr. Sickler, what do you actually consider the neighborhood? You kept saying you took a walk with your dog. If you took a walk with your dog, you checked out the neighborhood, and you kept referring only to Gates Avenue. What do you consider the neighborhood?
So again, when I did my analysis, I assumed someone walking or driving the street, again, from one end of Gates, from Mitchell to Tolbert. But there was some discussion from the board's planner, about doing more of the as the crow flies in a 200-foot or 500-foot direction. So I guess there were differing opinions of, I would say, in quotes, neighborhood. But there is a statutory standard of 200 feet being noticed, and that was what the board's planner
Do you
noted.
consider that the neighborhood, part of the neighborhood, what was notified?
I think they both could be considered neighborhoods, yes.
So why would you leave out the 6-acre lot across the street? Why would you leave out traveling south from Gates and Mitchell? Why would you leave out, I noticed you stopped exactly at Darty Avenue where the small lot was. You didn't say nothing about across the street on the corner of Darty and Mitchell, which is approximately a 150 by 150 and change lot.
So the reason why I
Mr.
didn't...
Nick over there actually lives there.
So the reason why I didn't include the other side of Mitchell Road is that it is a different zone over there. I believe that's the R3 zone as opposed to the R4 zone. So when looking at kind of zoning standards, that's a completely different menu of criteria. So that's why I didn't include anything on the east side of Mitchell Road. In terms of, again, when I did this exercise, my thought is when someone is driving by, what would they experience? It's unlikely that someone would drive down Gates Avenue and then drive down Dougherty Avenue. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
That's
wrong.
correct. I do that every day. I do it all the time.
Gates and
So I'm a guy that contradicts exactly what you're saying. But go ahead.
Sir, technically, that would have to be under oath when we do the comments. I know you want to go back.
I'm not
and
lying. I
forth.
live there.
No. Nobody says you are.
Okay.
But the time to tell the truth is later. This is the time to ask the questions.
Okay, very good.
So
Okay.
that was my goal in this was, okay, if you were walking, it's most likely if you're traveling along the street, again, I understand there may be people that snake the streets. My assumption was when people are driving by this site, they're likely driving by along Gates Avenue when they're seeing, the new lots A and B in that direction.
Would you say your report would have been better and more complete if you, as you said, walked the dog south on Mitchell, walked the dog north on Mitchell, walked across the street to the pond? Would that have been more complete report?
Again, I think that the board's planner indicated that there is further analysis that she'd like to see that may include not only the area that I included, the area she included, but also some additional features such as lot coverage and lot width and those items. So if that's something the board and the public would like to see, we would prepare that.
As a professional engineer and planner, don't you think it would have been more complete if she didn't have to ask and you would have completed everything? What else did you leave out?
I believe
No, that question is out of order. What else did you leave out?
I'm just wondering if anything
Where
else.
does that stop? Grocery list?
Hopefully it doesn't stop.
No. You may ask questions about the testimony he gave.
Okay. He indicated that across Mitchell, where the 6-acre lot is, that is the neighborhood. He indicated that the neighborhood would be down to Darty and Mitchell. So therefore, I do agree that it's incomplete, the report. And what the town planner, Ms. Elizabeth, had recommended. I totally agree with it. It should be relooked at.
This is the time for questions.
Yeah, this is a time for questions. This is not a time for your personal comments. You
Okay,
can
here's my
ask
other
them
question
at the
then.
end of the hearing.
Mr. Sickler, did you actually leave out talking about the 6-acre lot across the street and the bigger, larger lots if you go south on Milton? Because this report looks better by if you just stick to Gates where the older homes are and the smaller lots. Is that why you just stuck to talking about Gates Avenue? You didn't mention anything else? Is that the real reason?
No, that's not. I gave the reason why the lot across the street from Mitchell was not included, and we included everything along our street, again, from Mitchell to Tolbert.
Okay.
Your
'cause
question has been answered.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's
You may
clear.
or may
that's
not
all.
agree with it, but your question has been answered. Move on.
Okay, give me a moment, please. Mr. Sickler, you had mentioned that the lots on Gates going up the hill approximately 600 or 700 feet, you had mentioned that if you subdivided this lot into 3 lots, it would conform to the houses along that block, correct?
I said that it would be...
It'd fit in.
Fit in, yes, fit in.
That was your exact
Yes,
words,
yes.
sorry. Could it be fair to say that if we walked south on Milton from Gates, that subdividing that lot into 3 parcels would not fit in?
Are you referring to Mitchell or Milton?
Mitchell.
Okay,
Mitchell
sorry.
we're talking
Sorry,
about.
yep.
Milton's all the way down at the end of the
Okay.
block. It's still in the neighborhood, though, if you want to talk about Milton.
I would have to run the analysis to see. I'm not familiar with every single lot there. There are some lots that likely may be similar in size, and there may be some lots that are larger in size than what we're proposing.
Would you consider a lot across the street 6 acres larger?
Again, across Mitchell Road is a different zone with a different, with different zoning standards.
I thought this was answered. We agree that that's the neighborhood, though.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that Zone 3, R3, that question's been answered.
Agreed.
Okay.
Please stick to the testimony that was offered.
Okay, I'm just trying to get an answer. So,
Well, yes, but you don't have the right to answers which are outside the scope of this hearing. Please confine your questions to the testimony that was given, not to your judgment as to what he should have testified.
I just asked.
You can ask questions about what he testified.
I understand. I'm trying to do my best here.
You're doing good.
Again, I'm bringing up Gates Avenue. He agreed that if these lots were subdivided into 3 separate sections on Gates Avenue, it would fit into the neighborhood. The neighborhood, we all agreed, across the street is a neighborhood, Doherty Avenue is a neighborhood, going up the hill on Milton's a neighborhood. So I'm just asking a simple question. Would you consider, if you took that dog walk down any of those other directions, east, south, or north, would you consider that lot being larger fits in better? Simple question, yes or no?
I'd have to run the analysis to see if the lots on those other streets are larger and they're in the same zone, then I would potentially look at changing my opinion, but I haven't run that analysis.
It's hard for me to ask questions with an incomplete report right now. I'll pass the microphone to somebody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, no report was submitted by the planner. So if people are looking for a report, I didn't want them to think there was some document that hadn't been provided. It's simply his testimony and his opinions. No formal written report was provided to the board that would be part of the approval.
Please identify yourself.
My name is William Zerlo. I live at 8 Doherty Avenue, Gillette. I heard you talk about
I'm
those
sorry, look, sir, can you spell your last name?
ZURAWLOW.
Thank you. Please proceed.
About the drainage pits you were talking about putting in, that area, the water table is very bad. And when it rains, a lot of people get water in their basements. You're saying put those drainage things in. What happens when those fill up when the water's, it's gonna give us all a problem.
So they're designed to hold the same, so the design that we're required to follow will ensure that any type of overflow is no greater than what's experienced today. So if right now there's water that overflows our site to the neighboring property, there'll be no difference in the future. To ensure that there is no issues as it relates to groundwater, as you said,
Yes.
water coming to basement, we're required to do a soil test as well as a mounding analysis, which basically looks at when we add water to the groundwater, how much does it rise and how much does it affect?
you're gonna get that.
So we're required to do that as part of our
I'd like to see that because
documents.
that's the main thing up there is the water problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. David Coletta, 313 Long Hill Road. Last name Coletta.
Thank you.
Similar to the question just asked, these drainage basins, are they capable of catching sheet flow? Because you're going to be removing vegetation, you're going to be adding impervious area. What does that do as far as sheet flow, you know, especially with some of these larger rains that we've had? You got Preston, Magna all coming down that way as well. Are your studies taking into account the removal of the vegetation, the addition of impervious, you know, site build?
Yes, the benefit of them is that they could capture what is considered kind of point runoff, which would be from the roof, basically directed in via, you know, small pipe, as well as sheet flow from the general ground. So that's the benefit of the system.
Okay, and that's taken into account with the studies that you're doing?
Correct.
How do you account for that study is accounting for the removal of additional vegetation on those properties?
The ground and the type of ground that we have, depending on if it's asphalt, clay, gravel, highly vegetated areas, you know, all basically have different types of runoff coefficients, meaning how well does water seep in versus how much water runs off.
But you've got different seepage and flow now with the existing vegetation. You're taking into account everything that's going to be removed.
Correct, and the modeling, just, you know, so basically the modeling software takes existing and proposed, and what it does is you create a hydrograph, which basically shows the flow based on the intensity of the storm and over time. So basically, we have to match in our analysis that the graph of kind of water runoff is less than, for each kind of minute of the storm, less than what the existing condition is. So basically, we have to model that as part of our analysis.
And so like that, so the modeling that you're doing, does that take into account an Eta-type storm that we had last year? Because again, everybody downstream of that is getting wiped out, and all those houses are pretty much ground level.
So the level of storm, typically, depending on the type of application, again, you know, major versus minor, have different level of year intensity storms. It will not be at the level of a 100-year or a 500-year type storm, but the fact that we are improving it or being equal to it at the lesser storms means that we're making it no worse. We're not necessarily fixing the neighborhood by putting this in, but we're making it no worse.
Right, but are you at that point? Because we're getting 100-year storms every 5 years. So, you know, the historical.
Yeah. Would you please ask questions and not generalize about the weather, because it's not that often.
Well, there was, this town, a lot of people in this town got flooded out. And there's concerns about precedent if this gets approved with the topography in this town.
Ask questions about the testimony, don't invent facts.
But I am asking questions about what are they accounting for? What is being taken into consideration with their studies? They're not taking into account the full scope of what we have seen over the last 4 or 5 years.
That is a comment.
That's a fair question.
That's not a question.
It is a question. I just asked, what are they taking into account an Eta-type storm in their modeling?
He answered that. He answered that. And now, if you disagree with his answer, if you think that there are other factors that should be brought into it, then you'll need expert testimony along that line. You can't just stand there and say, we get a 100-year storm every 5 years.
Well, and that's fair. That's fair. But I was asking what the modeling is taking into consideration. And I asked if it was taking into some of the, you know, a more extreme version, because you were going to flood out everybody downstream of those properties.
So we're required to meet or better the performance of this site under all of the, I would say, lesser storms, which means that we will also do the same at the higher storms. Just our pit itself is not designed to capture every bit of rain that comes in a 500-year storm. It'll be better than the existing condition or equal to the existing condition, but we're not holding back, we're not able to dam the sheet flow for, you know, 500-year storm as part of the analysis. But again, it's going to be equal or better than what would happen if it came yet tomorrow when the site's not developed at all.
All right.
But the storage limit, we're required to have a certain amount of storage on our site. That piece, again, is not meant to hold back every drop of rain that comes in that level of storm. But again, it's better than if the rain comes tomorrow and runs off the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Please hold the mic in your hand. Yeah, thank you.
A little tall.
Crowded.
Yeah.
Pretend you're a pop singer.
I am.
Your name is?
My name is Bob Coletta, and that's my daughter.
And your address, Mr. Coletta?
Is 137 Chaucer Drive, Berkeley Heights, New Jersey.
Okay, and your questions of Mr. Seckler?
Yes. On several occasions tonight, you had said that the grading for your lots runs down toward lot 40. And you said that more than once. All your discussion has geared water on your 3 lots that you're proposing. What are you doing to stop sheet flow from going onto lot 40? I see nothing on the plans. I'll start with that. I see nothing. All I see are grades.
Mr. Coletta, you asked him what he's
Yep,
doing?
go ahead. I'm sorry. Yep.
So
Trying to help them.
what we are providing on the plans is a conceptual location for a seepage pit, which we intend to utilize for roof leaders, impervious coverage, and if we can, capture some of the sheet flow. We're not intending to capture all of the sheet flow. The site currently has sheet flow that flows overland into the properties towards the south.
The seepage pits are supplied by pipes, not by surface water. We're talking about surface water. You have, and you said it, you have from Gates to lot 40 is about 125 feet at a slight angle. The grade difference is 20 feet. 20 feet when you have a major storm, how are you stopping that water? A seepage pit, there's 3 seepage pits. How are you stopping the water?
You asked him how he stops the water?
Yep, okay, I'm sorry.
And I also mentioned in some of the testimony in which the engineer, or the board engineer, asked that we also could look at potentially some yard inlets to be able to capture, again, some points of sheet flow and intercept it. But again, this site currently has a large grade difference between Gates and the rear in which sheet flow occurs over land on this site.
Is that an acceptable answer, though? Is it acceptable that water just keeps flowing onto that piece of property? Is that really acceptable? If you're an engineer, I would think you'd want to stop that. You'd want to present a solution not to have water. So is that an acceptable solution?
Stop. If you're not an engineer and if you're not trained in this discipline, you should not criticize people who are. Please. Questions only on the testimony you heard. If you disagree with the answer, bring us a better answer.
Can I bring a solution? An engineering solution.
During the comment period at the end of this hearing, you're welcome to propose solutions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leon Brzezowski, B as in boy, R-A, S-O-W, S-K-I, 35 Dougherty Avenue. I'd like to understand the timing of the mounding analysis. Will that study be completed prior to a board's decision?
I think it was our intention to perform it as part of a condition of approval, should the board act favorably on it. But because then it would be reviewed by the engineer and ensure that technically it meets the required standards by the DEP. At this point, again, it seems like there's a lot of deliberation about the project, and to perform a mounding analysis, go out there, do the field sampling, disturb whatever area needs to be disturbed to get the soil samples, may be premature.
So that means we wouldn't know whether the impact on the neighbor in terms of increased groundwater wouldn't occur until after the board gave approval to build?
Well, I think that the condition would be that your board has an engineer to ensure that the analysis shows that, or if not, and we can't satisfy that condition, that there's no adverse impact on neighboring property, we'd have to come back here with a different design.
Okay. All right, I'll leave my opinion alone. The water that's flowing from the driveway, where is it going?
Is there, yes, which driveway are you referring to?
All three.
So the driveways pitch towards the roadways.
Okay.
So the A and B have a slight pitch towards Gates, so that would run Gates and then down towards the inlet at Gates and Mitchell. The one on Mitchell obviously runs towards Mitchell.
So is there an analysis that's being conducted to impact what will occur on the existing drainage system from the roadways? Because we're adding also water to the existing roadway. There's been a lot of talk about catching from the roof, but we haven't talked anything about the road impacts, the driveway impacts onto the roadways.
So we could perform and ensure that the capacity within the Gates Avenue drainage system is sufficient. If it isn't, then the alternative would be basically a trench drain near the property line that would catch the water going down the driveway and then reroute it back towards the seepage pit. But again, the preferred method would be to, if the system along Gates Avenue could support it, would be to have it run to Gates Avenue.
Okay. There was discussion today, which I thought was very interesting, about averaging the existing areas in terms of looking at 2 houses versus 3 houses as being, a different or maybe a better alternative. I wondered if that type of analysis could be applied to the variance that you're requiring for the height of the house. Because because there was a lot of testimony that you're trying to propose things that are in concept with the existing neighborhood. I believe you testified that the homes nearby are 1 and 2 stories. So wouldn't an analysis of appropriate height that conforms to the existing neighborhood for that average height for that neighborhood be the appropriate height for a home?
So the issue is that for a lot area, that is publicly available tax information. For height, I'd have to go to every person's backyard or front yard, find out their lowest point around their house, and then measure up to their roof.
Mm-hmm.
There are, again, from my observations walking up and down the street, there are houses that have what appear to be 2 living levels from the front. Some have 2.5 living levels from the front.
Right.
But I can't determine from publicly available data, or unless I get permission from everyone in the neighborhood, to again measure the elevation at their lowest point around the property, around the house, and then measure to their highest point. I was able to do the lot area because it's publicly available data. I don't have the available data of every single elevation around people's property.
But as part of a visibility analysis in terms of an impact, you should be able to do that from.
I think he answered your question.
Okay.
and I think that this thread has run out.
Okay.
This is not a debating as to whether he did it right or not. This is
No,
a
I'm not
question.
I'm not trying to suggest that. I was trying to see if there was an additional study that could be conducted to address this issue.
That's a yes/no answer.
So we're saying that there's no way, there's no study that can be done to address the height of the home being above or below the variance request.
The exact calculation is possible, not feasible. A look from the street and see how many stories you could see from a street, or how I could do, but I can't get the footage. I can't measure how high it is. I could look and say, they got 2 stories, they got 2.5 from the street. I can't measure, they got 36.2 feet, we have 33 feet type of calculation. But I could, from the street, I could look and say 2 stories, 2.5, 3, but I can't get a foot measurement.
Right. I mean, the point that of the question is that we recognize that the zoning has postdates the homes, and therefore we've attempted to do an analysis to address the zoning. I see a lot of work that was done to address the area, the side yards, front yard setbacks, but I don't see any similar type of analysis, and I would like to see some type of analysis to address the height.
That's a comment and a suggestion that you can make at the end of the hearing.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. In the interest of time, would anybody else who has a question for the engineer who hasn't asked it, please raise your hand. All right, we're going to have to continue the question session. Unless anybody wants to stay later.
I think once you do the questions and the comments, you're going to be, right? Yeah. I'm happy to go later, but you're talking.
I don't think the comments are necessary. I think you're going to have enough information from the questions, because you're not going to finish tonight, right? You've already said that. You're already going to come back with maybe alternatives, is the way I'm reading it.
You asked for answers to questions, and we would like to provide those answers before the board fully deliberates on them.
Yeah, exactly. So finish the questions, and then, so I'd go for the questions.
Yeah, that's about where I'd like to go, if, unless everybody wants to stay later and hear some more questions.
11:15?
And we're still not going to dispose of all of that, and we still have to give instructions to, as to what we want at the next hearing. So I think we should cut it off right now.
Oh, now?
Cut the questioning off, and see if we can get out of here in 5 minutes. Any arguments?
Yeah, I think we'd rather hear from the
I think
public.
we'd-
Hey,
Let's hear
You guys want to speak, yes?
Dennis, let's at least hear
Yeah, let
the
them
questions from
speak.
the public.
Saying just finish the questions right now?
Yeah,
No,
just finish the
just-
questions. Let them, so they can hear the
Dennis, why
question.
don't we just finish the questioning tonight? And get
I would have
Excuse me?
them line up
Let's
so you have
just finish
everybody
the
who has.
questions
and just-
and get it over with.
All right, then let's finish the questioning. How long would you like to last?
Well, how many hands are up? There's about 3 or 4, right?
Will you keep it to questions?
Yeah.
Can we see the hands? Who's got questions?
Line up.
Okay, we got
You're gonna keep
4,
it
so let's make it 11:30?
And I'm not going to count Chuck.
11:30 is the latest, yes.
11:30.
11:30?
11,
All in favor of 11:30, raise your hand.
go ahead. I'm good.
My name's Philip Spatz, 121 Long Hill Road. I've got the pond across the street.
Can you spell your last name, please, sir?
I'm sorry, what?
Spell your last name, please.
Spatz. My question is, all the water that comes off these driveways is going right onto my property. Now, the town put a swale there and catch basins, and the water still goes onto my property. So what can we do about that? And plus, my house is exactly 35 feet high when I built it.
So, Again, the drainage from our driveway on Gates should be ending up in the inlet that's at the corner of Gates and Mitchell. That there's an inlet on the southwest corner. The driveway that is the smaller lot, the one that fronts on Mitchell, we could look at putting a trench drain at the end of it and basically recapturing any of the runoff so it does not enter the Mitchell Road right-of-way and basically tie it back into the seepage pit. That's what we could do as part of that design.
Well, the catch basin is there, but it doesn't catch all the water. It still goes onto my property now. So what's going to happen when we put 2, 3 more driveways there?
That's a question that you'll have to take up with the township. I mean, this particular applicant can't fix all the problems all the time.
I understand, but he can try. That's what the applicant's for.
Maybe I could help, Mr. Seckler? What's the standard for an applicant developing these 3 lots, and how do you propose to meet it?
Yeah, we would need to make sure that we're not increasing the amount of impervious. If it is, then we'd have to ensure that we are mitigating that, or determine if the system could support it. If the system can't support it, then we would have to do trench drains on our frontage and basically capture any of the water that hits our driveway and bring it back to our seepage pits.
Your development cannot increase the rate or volume of stormwater flow, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Well, why not do the trench drains in the design now?
We could install it. Does not look like we're finishing tonight, so if we make revisions and resubmissions, we could include the trench drain.
And the other question is, you have no idea whatsoever how much import fill you're bringing in?
Not at this point, no.
You designed this and you don't have an idea?
I think that question was answered.
I guess, but it's a poor answer, let me tell you.
Whether you believe the answer or not is not relevant at this point. Now, you can make your comments later.
Hi, I'm Linda Gavin. I live at 28 Gates Avenue, Gavin. Just one very, very quick question. You've talked about the sewer moratorium, and you've talked about the fact that there's only one hookup there currently that you know of at the house. So you would only currently right now be able to build one house. Is that correct?
I have not had an actual conversation with the sewer company to say definitely. I imagine we would be able to get one. The fact that we have another lot that's undeveloped makes me think that it's possible we'd get 2, but I can't speak certainly about either case.
Because my question is, I'm not sure that I understand why this is coming up towards in front of the planning board when you're not even sure that you can build these houses due to sewer. Can you kind of give me an idea?
Yeah, we're here for permission from this board to subdivide these lots, to create 3 lots here. It is the applicant has to seek a number of outside agency approvals, including receiving necessary utility hookups. If they can't receive an approval, let's say from Morris County, then this project doesn't go forward. If they don't get sewer, then they might have to sit on this property for a while without the project going forward. But the first thing would be to get permission from this board to make this subdivision. That's the first step in the process. If we got permission for a hookup, but then this board doesn't allow us to subdivide the properties, then we've gotten nowhere.
Okay, so this hearing is just for subdivision of the properties. It's not for approval to build the houses, because you would have to submit plans for each house? Do I understand this correctly?
There are items that would need to be submitted, lot grading plans. We are basically creating ourselves a footprint for those buildings, so that we are looking to get approvals for the lot subdivision and footprints of buildings. We would have to come back for other approvals as it relates to lot grading, or if the footprints of the buildings are different than what we are proposing here, meaning that if they are expanded, if the setbacks become further violated, we are looking at coming up with basically a design that gets us a list of variances that hopefully when we build or go develop these lots, we do not exceed. I don't know if that was a proper answer. I know we have-
If I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, you're trying to get the approvals from the municipality, and in the event you are able to do so, your hope is that those approvals would provide protections for a period of time, and your hope would be to be able to get the other approvals necessary in that period of time in order to ultimately construct what you're looking to construct. Would that be generally accurate?
Correct, yes.
Just to try to help this member of the public and maybe others get a better idea of why you're here asking. Oftentimes, approvals at the municipal stage are usually at the first approvals, and if there is an approval, there are always many conditions and other outside agencies that have to come into play,
So-
and other steps.
Okay, so if this subdivision was approved and there was one sewer hookup, could you then, if the owner decided that he wanted to do septic tanks, would that fall under this approval because you're just approving the subdivision?
This approval does not, is indifferent to whether it's a sewer hookup or a septic system. If he can pass the Board of Health requirements for a septic system, you can do that anywhere in town.
So since there's such a big concern about runoff, is there a bigger impact with having two septic systems?
So the Board of Health would be the ones who would evaluate the size of the septic system and the location of the septic system to ensure that it does not impact seepage pits and things of that nature. So that's another technical approval that would need to be obtained, and there is that agency, the Board of Health, that reviews it from that standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Arendowitz.
Charles Arenowitz, Millington, that's Arentowicz. I read all the documents that are on the website about this application, and to my surprise, tonight I found out that on Lot A and Lot B, we have a 38-foot residence. My question for Mr. Seckler is, based upon your analysis, how many stories does that entail at 38 feet?
How many stories per your zoning definition?
Your definition.
Well, no, the stories is a defined statement within the zoning ordinance, and I could read you what the requirement is. A story is a portion of the building included between the surface of any floor and the surface of the floor next above it, or if there's no floor above it, then the space between the floor and the ceiling next above. Any basement with more than 50% of its wall exposed above grade shall be considered a full story. So based on that definition, we have a first floor and we have a second floor. We have 2 stories. Our basement does not qualify as a story, and our attic space does not qualify as a story. That's the zoning definition.
Well, but you, in your testimony this evening, you said, well, we take one step up to get out, or 2 steps, whatever it was. So your contention tonight is this building of 38 feet, A and B, is 2 stories.
Per your zoning definition.
I'm asking if that's your definition.
That's the township's definition.
So it's 2 stories.
Per the township's definition.
Okay. You indicated on your bar graph of red and green, thank God I'm not colorblind, that some of these lot sizes likely predated some of the zoning ordinances. Based upon the discussion earlier and some question from the chairman, are you going to redo that and determine did they predate the R4 zone?
I don't know if I have the ability to obtain every single approval that was granted within the neighborhood. Again, I could look for development patterns and see from old aerials to see when they developed. I think the request was to highlight maybe a different neighborhood or a different definition of a neighborhood. Again, I would opine that the vast majority of these lots were created well before the R4 zone requirements.
The graph the red and green is kind of misleading, and it's a little offensive to some of the people behind me. So if you and all your power could determine what predated the R4 zone, it'd be helpful. Next question. We sat here tonight for 45 minutes based on a letter that was written February 23rd, 2022 from our engineer, and we went through the questions page by page by page. The question for you tonight, instead of wasting our time for 45 minutes and these 30 people behind me, did you formally respond to the February 23rd, 2022 letter from our board engineer?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes, I believe the letter that you're referring to that we went through had a May date on it.
Mr. Rendowitz, I have to remind you that I asked our engineer to go through it line by line, so the 45 minutes that was spent doing that was my fault.
Well, my question is, I wanted to read the response. Was there a response?
A response letter was provided to the February letter. We received the letter. The letter I went through tonight with your board engineer was dated May 16, 2022. If we were to respond to it in written form, it would not have been available within 10 days in advance of this application, of tonight's hearing.
So will we have a written response to the February 23rd, 2022 letter?
Which letter?
February 23rd, 2022. It was a letter by our board engineer to you to respond to.
I believe we responded to that with the resubmitted application materials.
I'm confused.
I think the confusion is some of the comments were not, in my opinion, adequately addressed, so they were restated, I think is maybe where the confusion lies.
Did I miss the response? There was a written response that I didn't see. That's the question.
I believe there was a cover letter that was included within our resubmission package that included responses to those comments.
My question for you, if you didn't respond to all the questions raised on February 23rd, 2022, can you at least respond now to it in the future so we all could read it? Could you commit to that?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there was an April 26, 2022 letter from Stonefield that Mr. Seckler is referring to. It's authored by him April 26, and it goes through the February 23 letter. And it addresses all the comments. I'm not talking about well or not. I'm just letting everybody know I found the letter, and I believe it was part of the record, and I believe that's what led to Ms. Anello's, our engineer's, follow-up letter in May.
So
we don't want to wait, you know.
the answer to the question.
Yes, he did.
It is, and I hopefully it's posted on the internet. I didn't find it in my packet when I printed everything out tonight, or yesterday, a couple days ago. Next question. Based upon tonight's discussion, if we build and subdivide the into three lots, and we are requesting, based on the building height, is it 31 variances that would be required to build and approve the subdivision?
I think your council, or the board's council, went through that list. I think the number was around 30 or 31. I don't remember what the final number ended up at.
So we can agree that it's somewhere around 31 variants needed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Good evening. Please, Lord, let this be a simple, non-confrontational question.
I have a simple non-confrontational question for you.
Parker Godwin.
What's your name and address?
I was getting to that, yes. Parker Godwin, Godwin, opposite of Devil Lou's, Godwin, very simple, 35 Gates Avenue. You've spent a good deal of time talking about how these houses will fit into the current neighborhood, and you've scoped out where they would fit according to square footage of the lots and setbacks from the front. I haven't seen how it compares to the square footage of the houses themselves.
And I see.
And is that possible to do that as well? My quick calculation I come up with is you come up much more towards the green on square footage.
Yeah, the difficulty is from aerial photographs to get an understanding of how many stories every square footage piece is. Potentially, there's some tax records that can be utilized, depending on how accurate they are.
I'm pretty sure you can go on Trillia and whatnot. They have square footage approximation, because this isn't exact science here.
Except that I don't know if they're counting basements as square footage, or, there's some zoning calculation. Again, I could come up with something. I can't promise the accuracy is 100%.
I'm just curious because it's another piece of the fit-in puzzle, that's all.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I don't know if I'm going to get an answer to this anyway. And it's not.
You didn't get an answer to your first question. We didn't hear from the chairman yet.
Say again?
Wants to ask another question?
Well, yeah, if it's not too long.
It's not too long. Again, I may not even get an answer. What's that? David Coletta?
Yep.
Coletta, 313 Long Hill Road. Just looking for some context, and again, I don't know if anybody else can answer this. What's the average number of variances on similar projects?
It's really not a question that's relevant to this hearing.
Well, all right. I'm looking for context because again,
you can read the minutes of the and resolutions, and you can come up with that number.
Okay.
But it's not relevant here.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I was just looking for some.
Thank you.
My short answer is, I have no idea.
Or nobody wants to take the time to find out. Thank you.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Are there any other questions for the engineer? If not, I'm going to close the question and answer session, and we will go into a brief discussion about what happens next. And counsel, you had a suggestion about an hour and a half ago. Would you repeat it?
Mr. Chairman, there were a lot of questions asked of your planner and other members of the board. We did hear the public's questions as well. I think it would be prudent if we were able to take some time to do further analysis so that I can specifically answer the questions of Ms. Leheny, as well as provide the board some additional context with regards to their concerns and their direct questions of the applicant. I believe I already have a letter with Mr. Werner. I don't know what this does.
Sometimes it's a phone close to the microphone.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not.
I believe I've already provided Mr. Werner with a letter authorizing or consenting to the board's extension of this matter through today, as well as through the June meeting. I did that specifically, Mr. Werner, in that letter, so that consent would
I
already
think
be
it was
on the
the
record.
June 14 or whatever, the day after.
Okay,
But it may need to be further, I don't know.
We would consent.
The next meeting that you can come to is June 28. We have June 14th booked up.
Can I ask quickly what the principal things you heard and are going to take away from this discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I could address Mr. Hand directly?
Go ahead.
Mr. Hand, what I heard was there was a cut and fill analysis, there were neighborhood coverages, there was a side yard question. Mr. Sackler was talking about the side yard. We heard the chairman confirm or have him confirm that he was unaware of variances. There is an issue with regards to trunk lines available. And Matt, what else did you have on your list?
Landscaping.
The analysis would be a 500-foot, as per Ms. Leheny, would be a 500-foot analysis, not just on gates. And we would have additional information with regards to tree replacement and a landscape plan.
And would you consider the number of houses and the number of lots?
It seems to be clear that we should consider that, absolutely.
And the fill.
To be clear to us.
Did you cover the fill?
I have,
You mentioned
the cut and fill numbers. Yep,
Thank you.
thank you.
Does anyone here have any other suggestions of what you would like to see at the next hearing?
Well, the only other thing would be,
Yeah, my comment would be related to the stormwater analysis. I think, in response to my questions and questions from many members of the public, I think at this point it would be prudent to get more information on how, where, the size, the capacity of the existing drainage, existing runoff onto the neighboring lot, and, reductions in that, and, any amendments that may require to the grading plan that we're looking at, which may or may not impact things such as building height.
Would you be requiring submissions? I know the recent submissions were greater than 10 days in advance if we have design changes, just because I'm trying to contemplate when I would have to resubmit if things are changing?
A stormwater design, I would need more than 10 days in advance to be able to.
I mean, I would also have to do soil samples, so I need time to.
I think it's
I could
important.
turn it around in a couple days, but then that would give the board very little time to read a review letter. You know what I'm saying? It's
Just recognize,
If for purposes of today, we carried it to the 28th, and then we could collaborate on the timing required and confirm early enough whether
Right.
that's going to be real
And we can
date
also
or-
look at things piecemeal as well. If you want to
Yeah.
submit the soil results first and kind of, agree on we can have a discussion and agree maybe on a methodology and kind of an approach to start with and kind of take it from there. And I think the board may ask to, if of course you can't get this all done in time, that potentially it could.
Yeah, that's just my concern is if we've been
Understood.
trying to hit 20 days recently.
Yeah.
And that gives me very little time to
Yeah.
do a significant
I mean,
design.
10 days, again, I can turn around the stormwater review, but it's just going to give the board and the public very little time to review it.
So-
So, it's not in
I
their
think our
best interest.
council's opinion was take the 28th.
Well, the fact is that that's 5 weeks away. That's 5 weeks away. So because we got an extra Tuesday this month. And take 10 days off of that, that's 3.5 weeks from now to get the revised documents into our hands.
you're going to be busy.
There was Memorial Day.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, so we're going to carry the matter by consent. I'll put it in a letter to the June 28th meeting.
Oh, he loves making that.
Go ahead and make the announcement.
this next meeting? I'm gonna tell you right now. This matter, per the board and the applicant, is being carried without further notice, so this is the notice, formal notice, to Tuesday, June 28th, in person, 7:30 PM, and the applicant is providing an extension of time to act at least through the end of the month of June, in writing, correct, Counselor?
Yes, Mr. Ward.
Thank you.
And for the public's benefit, at the next meeting, 5 weeks from tonight, we will hear additional testimony from the applicant's engineer based on the additional submissions that he makes. And then we will go through the round of questioning one more time, and then we will open the meeting up to public comments on anything you might disagree with. And then the board will deliberate and ultimately will reach a conclusion and perhaps even hold a vote.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
The other alternative would be to continue it if we are still not satisfied. So there is no certainty in what will happen at the next meeting.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, during that open comment section, members of the public will be allowed to provide evidence on their behalf.
Yeah, everything that they do provide under oath is evidence, factual, or if there is an expert that you intend to retain, expert. You're also entitled to introduce documentary evidence or photographic evidence if it's, appropriate as well. So that's why I swear everyone in when they make comment. I hate the fact that they call it comment. It's not comment, it's testimony. Same as for the applicants, it's testimony, in support of, against, whatever, what have you. So that's why you're sworn in. And any potential experts.
Mr. Chairman, we still need a motion and a second to carry the matter with no further notice required by the applicant.
Motion and second.
So motioned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And just one other quick comment. Deb, how quickly will the video from tonight be on the website?
That will depend on the website company. The last video was available literally within, I think, a matter of like 5-6 hours the next day, but this is a longer meeting, and sometimes they have to trim it, so I would say within 24 to 48 hours.
So just so you know, if you want to recap this meeting, go to the website under the agenda.
Agenda minutes.
And I will review, if there were reports that were not placed on the website,
Yeah,
I will review that with the applicant to make sure that everything gets up on the website.
Thank you.
And before we adjourn, I just want to thank everyone for coming. It's nice to see so much public interest. Thank you.
Happy Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I have a tendency to wake up with this piece of paper about 50 times. Thinking it's you. Yes.
All right. We're good?
Not.